262 Ubers from the Battle Cats are going to be ranked in this video. From the common rosters to old collabs, I am going to rank all the Ubers from the Battle Cats. The rules are shown on the screen, mostly little things such as how I'll often talk about their main usage and will avoid mentioning unnecessary talent upgrades, abilities, and etc. Now that you understand that, we can begin the ranking. Without a doubt, the worst Uber of all time, a unit that has an extremely small range and health that their role as a tanker fails. Their targets of Black and Alien are a terrible choice due to both being heavy hitters resulting in a quick death. Even with the recent true form, it requires Behemoth Stones, thus making Hermit worthless once you obtain the resources for his true form. A ranged crowd controller that has a 30% chance to freeze red and black for 4 seconds. Once you receive iCat and Bomber Cat, she becomes near irrelevant. Even then, her percentage is terrible, making her worthless even before. A mid-range crowd controller who has half a chance to freeze red, black, and metal for 75% of her uptime. I'ma say this again, iCat, Bomberman, and Hoopmaster. Only passes Cornelia due to a higher chance and a bigger roster of trades. Summerluga is a variant of Nekoluga where she does surge attacks rather than a knockback and a freeze. Her spawn range is extremely inconsistent, throwing any potential usage of her surge. So odds are you're left with a unit that has a range of 650 and a DPS of 900. Her true form is out of question due to it requiring a gold seed. Crazed Princess Punt is a super backliner with half a chance of knocking back metal enemies and with talent zombies as well. My biggest issue is that being a super backliner isn't as effective with the given traits as all metals are short range and zombies can bury inside her range, killing her quicker. Overall, an underwhelming crowd controller. Holy Coppermine is better than her summer variant due to her having less competition to the trade she goes against. That doesn't mean she's good, though against Angel she has a tiny bit of potential. She's still fragile and doesn't guarantee a freeze though. Takeda is a nuker who deals a hefty amount of damage against Angel and Alien. This may sound promising, though once you look at the details, her usability falls. Her attack frequency being 17 seconds and attack animation being 2 seconds, meaning that you'll have to wait for a long time for her to land a hit, if she misses, which is more than likely. Mystica is a super backliner with a strong against and guaranteed chance to slow Black as well as Aku once you get to a true form. Against Black, she can have a little bit of potential though, her uptime for her slow is lower than half. Against Aku is actually worse due to their shields, making her absence of shield breaker a worse crowd controller against them. In the end, if you organize your lineup for her, she can be a somewhat okay crowd controller. Dhalsim is the first anti-traitless in the ranking, with their multi-hit having a guaranteed chance of weakening for 3 seconds against them. With their range of 350, he's comparable to the rare unit Dark Cat and gets heavily outclassed by him. His stats in general isn't good either, so you can only use him as an anti-traitless Dark with area. A ranged unit that does massive damage against Black with a half a chance of creating a level 3 mini wave and a guaranteed chance of knockback. Just like past Ubers, this unit can be easily replaced by a lower rarity, that being Pizza Cat. That doesn't mean that you can't just use him with Pizza Cat, it's just that there's no real situation where you need to. A well-known Uber being considered as one of the worst. His ability to curse is one of the worst crowd controllers in the game, as curse only works if it's permanent. The only reason why he's barely better than the other Ubers prior is due to the usage he can have as a ranged damage dealer in extreme early game, though once you progress, he becomes non-obsolete. Betrothed Balaluga may seem good at first, as its range and damage per second is actually good for a Luga, though from his stream multi-hit, only its last hit reaches in his standing range, meaning that you'll only get 1/3 of its damage. Its freeze is worse than its original variant, so he fails at both crowd controlling and dealing damage. Betrothed only works if the stage you're in has heavy pushers, but at that point, you need a better solution than just Betrothed Balaluga. Honda is mainly a tanker against Angel, and as you'd expect, Cat easily replaces his role on meat shielding Angel. Even if you want to use him as a tanker, funny enough, his range is too long for him to take the hit, though can be semi-countered with his guaranteed knockback against Angel. Still, it's just better to use Ramen. Ursula Marcia is a mid-range unit who has a 30% chance of dodging attacks from red and floating and a guaranteed level 3 wave on her second hit. A dodge with a chance that low should be viewed as a bonus rather than a reliable ability, though the problem is that's her only form of surviving, making her usage extremely risky. Her waves aren't rewarding either, as it's created on her second hit, lowering her chances of the wave landing. In the end, she's an extremely okay-ish against floating and red only stages. Soldier Rocker has the similar method of Betrothed Balaluga, where their stats may be accepting at first, though only one of their hits land from their multi-hit. Their 9k goes to 3k, which becomes genuinely pathetic, though their massive damage against Red, Angel, and Alien, and Colossus Slayer is what makes this unit better than previous, though it's still best not to use him once you progress further. Hatsune Miku is a mid-range that is extremely basic, strong against red, floating, and angels with a guaranteed chance to weaken them. The problem with Miku is that she's extremely underwhelming as her damage is low, her traits are some of the most power crept, and her weaken isn't nothing to praise as she only has a range of 350, thus downward turge clearing the job. Her potential only rises in the early game where she has little to no competition. Purge is an anti-metal who has a 40% chance to perform a critical hit. The problem isn't her, as she does perfectly fine against her trait. The problem is the trait itself. Metals are easily countered with Jurassic Cat in the cats you receive from the Cyclone stages, so there really isn't any wiggle room for more anti-metal. Also, her percentage for a crit is low, so she shouldn't be your only metal critter. Saki Nijama is a lower mid-range unit who guarantees a slow against black and floating for more than half her uptime. Saki performs a well job against her certain traits, but due to her concerning range of 325, she's more replaceable to cheaper and common units such as Bomberman Cat and Sanso Cat. At best, she does a fine job against close and range floating and black enemies. Seiya Kamiki is a unit who aims to be a generalist with a 50% increase in damage once she's half her health. Generalists are amazing, but having a range of 400 limits you heavily. If she had a better range, her placement in this ranking would be a huge difference. A ranged unit with a 40% chance of knocking back red and alien enemies. There really isn't that much to say about Nisatama Army as they're okay at just everything. Though to be honest, I personally like the low chance of knockback as it won't bother the other units brought onto the stage. Nekoluga is a super backliner that guarantees a knockback and a freeze. If you want a unit that guarantees a short freeze and a knockback every now and then Nekoluga is the unit for you. That's about it. Lilith Cat is a unit that has a 75% chance of freezing angels and on her true form against Aku as well. Her true form isn't worth it as she won't be able to live long enough against Aku due to their waves, surges, and death surges. She does a good job against close range angels, but Sanso's talented angel target can do a good enough job. Spooky Thundia is near identical to her normal variant in stats, except for her typing being black rather than red. Pizza Cat easily replaces her, and due to her absence of true form and talents, her stats are still weak. Gil is a mid-range crowd controller who is resistant and guarantees to slow and weaken on his second hit against floating. Again, Sanso and Octopus do a better job, and his general health is extremely weak for being a tanker. With a big range and huge piercing for the amount of damage he does, Nobunaga seems like an amazing sniper. The main problem with him though is the survivability. Although he's immune to waves and he has a good standing range, the moment enemies begin to hit him, he won't be able to reposition himself. Though in a few stages, he can do a decent job in crowd controlling all the enemies in the stage, though that rarely ever happens. Moon Operators is a backliner with a guarantee of slowing red and zombies. Zombies are more risky as she has a low health and no abilities to protect against zombies, thus they're able to barrel and beat Moon Operators more quick. Their slow isn't anything to write home about as its uptime isn't good, so you're just better off using Housewife and Kanken to slow these trades. Though overall, they do an okay job against their trades. Zangief is an interesting zombie tanker with an HP of 136,000 and 210 range. He has a 20% chance to dodge attack from zombies for 2 seconds. This concept sounds amazing though, you have to be extremely lucky with his dodges in order for him to work. If his dodges do not activate, he'll get killed easily as he doesn't have no resistant nor strong yet. Worse is that his recharge time isn't short in case you weren't lucky with your first Zangief. In the end, he's an unreliable tanker. Sodom is a ranged tanker that can resist flowing with a guaranteed knockback against them. He's known for his movement, and reasonably so, as his slow movement will cause him to take a while before he's able to crowd control floating. But with only knockback, it's better to just use anti-floating rares and supers. There's nothing really wrong with him besides his stats being a disappointment. A ranged unit that guarantees to weaken against angel, aliens, and zombies. Celeste performs better than past supers as these traits still have room for new units to handle. Her decent range makes her welcome to bring in stages containing those traits, though the biggest problem with her is her uptime. It isn't even half, which makes her be in this rank this early. Overall, she's an okay-ish crowd controller during mid-early game. Kamukura is just another anti-black crowd controller that gets easily replaced by lower rarity units. You'll mainly just use her as a generalist. Ryoka Hibiki is a tanker against black and metal with a guaranteed chance of knocking them back, and an extremely low chance of a critical hit. His 3% critical is too low to rely upon. Black and metal are the traits that least need a tanky backliner. His true potential he may have is simply being a unit with a range of 480 that deals a decent enough damage. Iliathviel is a decently well-ranged crowd controller who has a 2-part multi-hit with half a chance of flowing red and metal for 5 seconds in each hit. Having a range of 460 means that if your common anti-red or metals can't crowd control properly, Iliathviel can be thrown in to decently slow them, though a case like that rarely occurs. If you unlock her early game, she could be a good range generalist. Red and Len do a fine enough job in crowd controlling black and metal with their half a chance of knocking back and or slowing them. Their long distance is nice as it adds piercing to the enemy in the back, but as you can tell by the pattern, black and metal get easily power crept. Still, they're a fine enough Uber to deal with these two traits if you have an extra slot in your line. Takachi is the newest and first elemental pixie in this ranking. Due to no true form or talents, Takachi still has a lot of room to fill their role. With a low range of 170, it's concerning that their health isn't even at 100,000, so they have to rely heavily on dodging floating, angel, and alien, and that's 10%. Though the reason why I place Takachi higher than other dodge units such as Zangief is due to their fast cooldown, so in case of your previous Takachi fails in the field, you can just throw another one in quickly. Wave Rider Ku shares similar traits as their original and Christmas variant, though Wave Rider is more praised as their target is more acceptable and notably has a faster attack frequency, meaning that her potential misses isn't as damaging. As just said though, a unit that misses is still a unit that misses. Rin Tosaka is a 450 range unit that has half a chance of knocking back aliens and zombies. All of her stats are as basic as it gets, with a usual 4 knockbacks, decent health and damage, and recharge time. She gets more praised as aliens and zombies are more on the lesser power creep traits, thus giving Rin Tosaka time to shine. Totomeki shares near identical stats to Rin Tosaka. You can rewind the video and compare them, I'm not even playing. Though Totomeki gets the upper hand since her half a chance of slow against zombies and aliens is a better choice than knocking back. Baby also shares near same identical stats as the previous 2 Ubers, though out of the 3, Baby is the best as she's given a guaranteed weaken against zombies and aliens, as well as the faster cooldown. HMS Princess is a unique Uber as she focuses more on being a generalist who gains double the money for each kill. If there's a reason on why she's low on the rank, is due to her underwhelming stats as she has a damage per second of 4,000 with a range of 410, though thankfully she has a recharge time of 75 seconds. She is also immune to waves, which can become useful if you're low on immune to wave units. Ken is a melee tank who has an Omni Strike that pierces up to 100 and is strong against Red, Floating, and Angel, with a guaranteed knockback on his final hit of his 3-part multi-hit. Due to his underwhelming health not even reaching to 100,000, he can easily die in later stages of the game, with his recharge time not being good enough. He can still be a good Uber during early to mid-early game. Hellwarden Emma is a generalist tanker who blocks any waves she encounters. The problem with her is her endurance and replaceability. Her knockback of 10 makes her familiar to Supercar, where rather than defending the waves, she may leave room for the wave to reach her units due to her constantly getting knocked back. Not only that, but the presence of Octopus Cat in its wave blocker makes Emma less appealing. Koyoko Sakura is a decent enough anti-red crowd controller who has half a chance of knocking back and or weakening red enemies for a surprisingly long amount of time. If in the rare case you don't have red crowd controllers, she could have some spotlight in crowd controlling red. Kubaluga is a crowd controller in its second form and a metal critter in its true form. At the second form, he's mostly used to cheese stages, though as years go on, newer stages become less cheesable, thus Kubaluga being useless. True form Kubaluga really has no usage, since their damage is generally pathetic to the point it only clears metal doges. If you ever see someone use Kubaluga today, it'd be mainly due to the cat combo long necks, which provide a medium worker cat start level up. The first Ultra Souls in the ranking, Isumboshi is a rusher against traitless and angels with being able to pierce. The biggest problem with him is that he fails to be a good rusher. A range of 150 and a speed of 50, those are underwhelming as the angels and traitless you were planning to use Isun for have a quick attack frequency or long range to the point where they don't even let Isun land a hit. PPT-48 is a mid-ranger that has a 40% chance of freezing black enemies. Being a unit that freezes black, you may think that she's replaceable by Bomber Cat, though that's completely true. In her talents, she's offered to target angels. Freezing angels is still a role that hasn't been fully covered, and with her range being 380 and a recharge time of 20 seconds, she could be treated as a better Juliet, though nothing more. The 10th Angel is best described as risky yet rewarding. His 400 range, 2 knockbacks, and 40,000 health may make them fragile, though in return, he's given massive damage against angels, a pierce of an insane 500, a level 2 surge attack, and a guaranteed freeze against angels for 2 seconds. If all hits land, you'll be using a unit who does 12,000 damage per second against angels, with a pierce of 500 and a freeze as a small bonus. It should be said again though that they're extremely fragile due to their pathetic 400 range. The most may just use something safer. Cat Clan Heroes is a long-range crowd control that weakens Red, Floating, Black, and once true formed, Relic as well. The first 3 traits can be easily countered by other units, though Relic can have a bit of potential as Cat Clan has a pierce of 150, letting them weaken most relics on the field. As part of the dynamites, they have a quick recharge time, meaning that if your Cat Clan on the field dies, you can quickly spawn another one. Overall, an okay-ish crowd controller. Blissa is the second newest elemental pixies and has the same problems as Takashi, where her potential hasn't yet been uncovered due to the lack of true forms and talent. She aims to be a mid-range anti-zombie and alien, though her health and damage is too low for her to be used in any real difficult stages. She could be a good unit during Into the Future and zombie outbreaks, though those aren't really huge accomplishments. Kamukura is a safe bet on crowd controlling red with half a chance of a knockback and or slowing red for an uptime of 75%. His general stats are too low for him to do decent damage, though as said, if you wanted to crowd control reds in the field, he's a goodish option. Mattshea is an anti-straightless mid-ranger, with a 30% chance to dodge straightless and a guaranteed level 4 wave on her second hit. Her chances of dodging is extremely low, and she takes too long for her second hit to land, meaning that her waves aren't going to be on the field as often. The reason why she's higher than others though is due to the fact that she targets straightless, which is very demanding. Nekoluga is a crowd controller whose main purpose is to slow all enemies for 3 seconds. He's mostly compared to Cyberpunk Cat, which easily replaces him, though you can pair the two up and have a good crowd control on the stage. Twinstars is a mid-range nuker who does massive damage against Black and Alien. With a damage per second of 7,000, once you factor in the massive damage, you get a unit who does 28,000 damage per second. This sounds amazing, but once you put her onto the field, her multiple flaws show. Many of the Black enemies she can outrange have a high knockback count, and due to her 3-part multi-hit, her first hit will probably knock them back, thus her damage per second becomes a fraction of the original 28,000. Against Alien, it isn't any better, as most are known for having a longer range of 350, leaving her with no competition. In the end, her traits will draw her true potential. Frozen Rose Cat is a White Day variant of Ice Cat with close stats compared to her, though Frozen Rose Cat aims to freeze zombies with her 75% chance of the freeze occurring. Again, just like previous crowd controllers, she's extremely fragile, and against zombies who bury onto her range, her 30,000 health won't save her at all. Kachi is a backliner that guarantees to weaken against angels and aliens, with almost a full uptime. Crowd controlling angels and alien is more than welcome, but that's all he is. His damage output is extremely low, coming in at only 3,500 damage per second. Along that, his movement is too high, so he may clip in, resulting in a quicker death, though that can be covered with his decently fast recharge. Thundergatsus is a tanked backliner who is resistant against Angel. There's nothing bad to complain about him, just simply underwhelming. He can be useful if you have no other backliner, but other than that, he's like basic. Like really basic. Blooming Kamukura is another backliner who has half a chance of flowing and or knocking back metals in once true formed Aku. He also has wave immune, which gives him a few bumps in the ranking. Metals can be ignored as said before, but Aku can be a bit useful. If you have no other anti-Aku crowd controlling, he can have some usage, though his lack of shield piercing and surge immunity is what makes him worse than others. Chronos the Bride is a White Day variant of Empress Chronos, making her seem welcoming, but the changes in her stats make her far worse. Rather than a dream multi-hit with a guaranteed freeze, with each hit, she has half a chance of slowing, weakening, cursing enemies, and a 20% chance of creating a level 5 mini-wave. Though having many possibilities for affecting enemies is welcoming, she quickly becomes unreliable due to her not being able to properly crowd control, as you'll never know what abilities she'll land in her attacks. Even then, her extremely low duration of 1.5 seconds makes using her not worth it. It's best to view her as a second crowd controller, not your main. Mobius is the only Uber from the Crash Fever event, being a red killer and crowd controller. She's fine and does a good job against red with a guaranteed knockback and her massive damage. It's just that red is the most power crept trait. You could just use Courier, Can, Rocat, and those can take care of red just fine compared to her. Nurse Cat is an Uber from the Dynamite set, being a ranged crowd controller with half a chance of knocking back and or slowing floating and black enemies. Black can be ignored as Bomber Cat replaces a lot of the black crowd controllers, though floating can be nice during early to mid game, even mid-late games, since she's crowd controlling one of the more common yet open for unit targets. She does a fine enough job at crowd controlling floating. Lancer is a backliner that does a decent damage and guarantees a barrier break. That's all there is to say about him. Yeah, he's a safe bet unit to bring if you have no other Ubers. Basic stats, though, has a good range. Yeah, that's right. The Christmas variant Twin Stars is better than the original. No Angel Twin Stars advantage all comes down to the traits she targets, Floating and Angel. Angel shares the similar page as Black, where the enemy's Twin Stars can counter has a huge knockback count, thus the enemy's only getting a fraction of her damage. Though Floating enemies, as said about Nurse, is a popular yet open room for opportunity, Twin Stars does a good enough job in dealing huge damage against Floating. Wyvern Cat is what Twin Stars wishes they could be. Wyvern is simply a mid-range snooker who has half a chance of weakening Black. He deals 26,000 damage per second against Black, and he's also given Colossus Slayer in true form, so he clears Lake Grim by a mile. All in all, a good Black snooker, though his mid-range is what truly limits him. Bija is a perfectly serviceable anti-metal, being a long-distance unit with a guaranteed freeze against metal and a 30% chance of landing a crit. His long distance pierces up to 350, which sounds amazing until you realize no ranged metal exists. His decent critical chance and guaranteed freeze against metal is the only reason you'll use him, though outside of metal stages, it's best not to use him at all. Keiji class is a Christmas version of the original Keiji and is extremely nerfed in this version. On Keiji's class true form, he's resistant against Aku in red, with a strengthen that doubles his damage once he reaches half his health. This sounds amazing until you realize that they removed 50% less range compared to the original. The 350 to only 300 range is a huge difference, since it means that Keiji will be often hit more and killed quicker. Still though, Keiji class is still a decent tanker against the traits. Plus he's also given immunity to waves, and it's a good option if you need a unit with that immunity. Miyabi Obama does what Keiji class can't. Though she doesn't have resistance against any trait, she has a safe 380 standing range with immune to waves and strengthening to 50% more once she reaches half a health. Her ability to reposition herself 3 times compared to Keiji's 1 time makes her a better and safer option when countering waves. If you roll her, she's a good unit at wave stages, though nothing more. Sweet Love Mikako is a Valentine's variant to the original Mikako from the Dark Heroes, meaning that each form has a different role. All forms have half a chance of freezing a certain trait for 4 seconds that have an uptime of 57%. The second form is irrelevant as his trait is black and Bomberman can outperform her, and her true form can be put onto good use if you don't have a lot of anti-relic crowd controllers. Her real potential is her first form, which freezes traitless. Now as said, traitless has little competition in Uber, so Mikako can strive to crowd control them. Still, half the chance is still not guaranteed, and in average, you'll freeze traitless each 14 seconds for 4 seconds, which isn't a lot to be honest. Ricky is part of the River City collab, with his first form being a melee unit and his second form being a backliner. His stats can be ignored as his true use is for its cat combo, Bring It On, which requires just him to activate a unit defense up. This is a good cat combo, in case you want to strengthen the rest of your units in the loadout, and will only be the real reason you use him. Springtime Kenshin is an Easter variant of War God Kenshin, who aims to be strong against angels with a guaranteed chance of knocking them back. Sadly, in order to unlock her true form, you'll need a golden catfruit seed, which once you reach at that level of the game, her usage already becomes non-obsolete. Though during early to mid-late game, she can be a good anti-angel as she'll guarantee a crowd control as well as take chunks of health from them. Sadly, as just said, later in her game, her stats won't reach the expectations of your other units. They got us another unit from the Street Fighter collab, with his role being a massive damage against floating with an increase in its damage by 50% once their health reaches to half. If his strengthen activates while dealing damage to floatings, he does an astonishing 27,000 damage per second. Should be said though that he's still a unit with underwhelming stats, with only a standing range of 350 causing a quick death, and poor damage outside of floating, so it's best just to use him in floating only stages. Rama Saotome is a mid-ranger who does massive damage against red and floating with a pierce of 75. Again, his biggest drawback is his range, as he only has a standing range of 325, plus a health of just 60,000. I mean, what's the point of dealing a lot of damage if you're simply going to get perished by the enemy? Still, if the stages contain a bunch of melee enemies, he could be a good option. Another anti-floating with half a chance of knocking back and or slowing floating. Medigora does share similar stats to Nurse Cat, though Megadora's faster attack rate results in a better crowd control against floating. Sakura is a melee with a pierce that does massive damage against all traded enemies. She shares a similar role to Is the Dancer, a well-known Uber, though what Sakura fails to do is survivability in the field. Sakura has 50 less range, meaning a quicker death, and though she has bigger health than Is, her recharge time being double doesn't justify it, leaving you with having no Sakura in the field for the majority of your run. Cake Machine is the first variant of Cat Machine on this ranking, being a white day version of them, with the ability to resist Angel and Aku enemies with half a chance of weakening them and a 75% chance to pierce Aku shield. Neither of his weaken or pierce will satisfy your need for crowd controlment, as Cat Machines are known for their long attack animation, thus them missing most of the time. The real usage for Cake Machine is being resistance against Aku. Ramen Cat covers Angel resistance, as Aku is still a new typing, leaving room for new Ubers such as Cake Machine itself. As a result, he does a fine enough job on tanking the Makus. Balaluga shares a similar role to its brother Asaluga, though Balaluga's freezing and its later true form weakening is superior than Asaluga's slow and it's less replaceable. If you want the enemies on the field to freeze for a small time, Balaluga can do that well. Mighty Sphinx Corpse is a tanker, rusher, crowd controller whose resistance against red, metal, and zombies, with half a chance of weakening them for 4 seconds. His weaken ability against these traits aren't too bad as he's able to pierce up to 100, and if we apply his resistance and weaken, his health can go up to 1,000,000. He's a hefty tanker though, Ro can cover that job just fine, metal isn't a huge deal, and even if zombies may sound like room for opportunity, his ability of Soul Strike may make it difficult for him to reach in the front, where the battle is happening. Also a problem for all tankers is that if there's an enemy outside the trait on the stage, they may quickly get rid of that tanker. Akane Tendo is a generalist who pierces up to 50%. with a guaranteed breaking barrier and a 30% chance of a savage blow. With her short recharge time, she could be a decent generalist in your early to mid-late part of the game. Her Pierce and Savage Blow are more than welcome, though her damage per second is still lower than average. But her main selling point is her barrier breaker, as not only does she guarantee them, but pierces to the enemies more further. View her as the strong fencer cat. Shaman Khan is the backlander who is unique to the others, as he has a 30% chance to knock back and or slow all trays for 2 seconds, as well as having a long distance that pierces up to 300. The knockback and slow should be treated as a bonus, as their percentage is too low to be relied upon. Rather, his strength is his long distance. There isn't many non-Ubers that have a pierce of at least 300, so Khan may be your Uber to use if you need them to hit most of the enemies in the battle. Great Flower Verbana is a metal creator with her 3 multi-hit, each having a 25% chance of landing a crit. If you're having troubles with metals and you currently have her, she'll help you take care of them, as simple as that. Alright, Ku is an interesting unit. She's a ranged nuker that's strong against red and black. As said previously, her attack frequency is too long, as well as having a long attack animation, making her more likely to miss. You may question why she's the best out of the 3 variants, and it's due to her Ultra Talent. Her Ultra Talents decrease her attack frequency by nearly half, given a new trait which is Relic, and becomes immune to searches, which is huge late game. If you apply her level 60 Talents and Ultra Talents, you'll get a unit that does a whopping 20,000 damage per second and 30,000 damage against Relic and 36,000 damage against red and black. This sounds amazing, and it is, though you have to understand that to unlock this, you'll need to spend 15 Dark Kasli on her and 700 NP for her main talent. This price is what draws her back to this rank, and the fact that there are other Ubers to spend your rare Dark Kasli on. Though if you only have her and you're willing to spend the resources, she'll do her job good. Shampoo is a simple range unit who guarantees a level 4 mini wave in each of her 3 multi-hits. She's good at knocking back peons and behaves as a range crazed macho legs. Basic journalist that you can use if you're feeling basic. Another metal crowd controller, similar to Vega, though her stats and abilities are more welcoming. Sakura Sonic guarantees to slow and weaken for around 3 seconds, with a small 5% chance to land a critical hit. Of course, her critical hit is too small to just use her and her only, and again, metals aren't as big as a problem. Though her cat combo, Ninjutsu Q, is what brings her up to the spot. This cat combo increases the percentage of other critical hits by 1%, which makes a huge difference in reality. You'll most likely just use Sakura for her cat combo, though her crowd control against metal is welcome. Donald Morden's main selling point is his ability to resist and knockback trait list. Some may argue that he gets outclassed by Tourist Cat, and while in some cases it's true, his area attack and better standing range allows him to safely and eventually land his hits and knockback trait list. Alien is also welcomed. Furluga is a huge backlander with a guaranteed chance of breaking both barriers and shields, as well as spawn a level 2 mini surge 100 further from his standing range. His main premise is piercing shields, at which Furluga does an incredible job due to his huge 700 standing range, immunity to surge, and a guaranteed level 2 mini surge. Many can mention how he can be replaced by Aku Researcher, which is fair, though pairing them up will give you the anger management combo, starting your worker cat at level 3. Overall, Furluga is a good shield piercer, though nothing more. Grateful Crane is popular due to his insane range, guaranteed knockback and freeze to Angel and floating for 5 seconds, and having one of the longest attack animations. If Ku's 2-second attack animation was already problematic, Grateful Crane has an attack animation of nearly 11 seconds. The reason why he's further in the rank though is due to his insane range and rewarding abilities. 5 seconds of freezing is nothing to laugh about, so if you adjust your loadouts so no units knock back the enemies, Galaxy Cosmo can work incredibly, though others would much rather use different Ubers if that situation occurs. Midsummer Rabbit is a summer variant of the White Rabbit, with her first form guaranteeing a slow against Black and Angels, while her second form becomes strong against them. And both forms are good, as she has a safe standing range for a crowd controller and damage output. She's mainly just a good crowd controller against Angels though. Marauder Cat is considered to be one of the best metal critters in the game, and it's easy to see why. He outranges most common metals, as well as having a fast recharge and an appealing 50% chance of a critical hit. With an attack frequency of 5 seconds, you can expect him to land a couple of critical hits. He's an amazing metal critter, though at the end of the day, most will rely on Jurassic Cat and save an extra slot for another unit. Hermie is a mid-ranger who is strong against zombies and nothing more. She has decent health and deals a good enough damage against zombies in order for her to be worth having in your loadout. Spectral Gauss Vega is simply a mid-ranger that is strong against traded and has half a chance to weaken them. She may sound good, but her stats are a bit underwhelming, even with the strong gun. She's still a good unit that can pierce up to 250, which is what got her this far, but nothing more. Medigora also has a lot of abilities that all add up to an okay-ish unit. His main selling point is being able to resist zombies and blacks with half a chance of slowing them for 4 seconds. Due to his 3 multi-hit, he's more likely to slow the 2 targets. His Colossus Layer, Curse to Zombies, and Immunity to Toxic makes him a perfect counter to Penguin C. All in all, a good tanker that will crowd control the zombies in the field for a good while. Super Suits is resistant to traded enemies with a guaranteed chance of weakening them for half his uptime. He's simply just a unit that will stay in the field for the rest of the stage, dealing a decent damage while weakening them for half the time. And his immunity to the common debuffs also welcomes him to enemies that knock back, freeze, slow, and weaken. Nightbeach Linlin is a mid-ranger with a strong against Treatless and Alien, a guaranteed break barriers, and a 20% chance to dodge the attack of the 2 traits. Against Alien, she's okay-ish, though there's better alternatives to them. Against Treatless though, she could be a mid-ranger that can constantly deal damage against them with a small chance of dodging when the field heats up. Her recharge time is fast enough to even have 2 Linlins on the field. All in all, a decent anti-Treatless and Alien mid-ranger. The definition of a generalist. Ryu has a range of 480 with being able to increase his damage by 50% once he reaches that 40% health, and a 20% chance to land a savage blow. He'll do a good job at staying in the back and chip away the enemies constantly. Though to use his full potential, you need to get to his health to 40%, which odds are won't happen often. If you're mad at using Wolf due to her pushing back the enemies right before Bahamut lands his hit, then Ryu could be a decent replacement as a generalist. Nekoluga is a huge backliner who has a 20% chance to knock back all enemies, and a guaranteed chance of spawning a level 6 mini-search. It's best to use Nekoluga as any other Luga, rather than your main Uber, as his mini-search is too unreliable due to the spawning range. Though if it lands on the right spot, it can deal a huge amount of damage to even backliners. His small percentage of knocking back enemies is also nice, as it could be viewed as a breaker blast in your loadout. Masamune is a ranged unit who has a 40% chance to knock back red and black enemies. His strength is that his damage per second is decent for the standing range he has. Again, another Uber you can replace in case Uro makes your Galaxy Cosmo miss his attack. With that said though, he's been given 1 ultra talent, that being a guaranteed mini wave, which some praise as Masamune becoming a better unit. Though similar to Ku, the requirements of Dark Kasli and NP will steer players into different Ubers. Pegasa is the newest unit in the Galaxy Gals, with a guaranteed chance of weakening floating and zombies for a near full uptime with a bonus of being able to conjure a spirit. Pegasa's spirit guarantees a slow to all enemies for 6 seconds, which is nice and all. But once you use the spirit, you're just left with a mediocre unit that weakens floating and zombies waiting for the bucket to be kicked. In the end, her spirit is what saves her. Christ is seen as a ranged lesser demon cat, where he's given a single attack that deals massive amounts of damage. This may sound good at first, but his attack animation is too long to the point that it limits him even more in the stages he could have worked in. In empty peon stages, Christ thrives, though once again, the attack animation draws him back hugely. The strongest alien and floating is also a nice bonus. Good Cat Machine is an egg version of Cat Machine, with his traits he's against being floating and metal rather than red and alien. Metals can be ignored as not only is there better alternatives, but due to the lack of immunity to knockback, Super Metal Hippo will juggle him and push back the units further. Against floating though, he can be a decent tanker with a good probability of freezing them due to floatings not having that much of a knockback count, though his raw health is still not as much as other tankers, so keep that in mind. Aido is a specialist against floating with the ability of strong against and half a chance of knockbacking them. His health is surprisingly higher than average, so you'll most likely have them in the field for the entire run, and their decent 11,000 damage per second against floating is welcoming, all the while he pushes them back every now and then. Behaves similarly to Ryo, though his activation of a 50% strength and damage is at 75% health, which is nice. Gilgamesh is also given long distance, which is huge, going up to 335 piercing. This may seem amazing, but his multi-hit is what murders him. Since he deals a good damage even in each multi-hit, enemies with a high knockback count will get knocked back, resulting in only a fraction of his damage landing them. Still, his pierce is nothing to laugh about, though make sure to protect him properly as he only has a range of 390. The White Rabbit is part of the Dark Heroes, though most of her forms are nothing too eye-catching. The most appealing form of her is the second form, where she becomes strong against Red and Alien, which is welcomed with her safe backliner range of 465. Though of course, recently she's received an Ultra form where all of her previous 3 forms are basically combined together into one. If you are in late game and are in dire need to dominate Red and Alien, her Ultra form can do the job. Of course, as mentioned again and again, you'll have to use 15 Dark Kasli, which for some would rather use it on other Ultra forms later on the list. If you find value in her true form, she can be a good red and alien crowd controlling killer. Sanosuke Sagara behaves similar to the previous Uber Hermit, though due to his resistance, small pierce, and bonus savage blow, Sanosuke gets the upper lead to being a mid-range zombie killer. He's incredible in zombie stages only, though needs to be taken care in mixed stages. And Bison is one of the more underrated units from the Street Fighter collab, as he has many opportunities and he takes advantage of them decently. Once you receive the Fruit Treasures and Into the Future in Kasli Cosmos, his DPS against the traits goes to 8,000 with a strong health of above 100,000 against them. He becomes a strong specialist and comes with a guaranteed chance of breaking barriers and zombie killing. Though as you progress, you'll most likely get Ubers that specialize on one of those certain traits and do a better job. Still, he's a good unit with nothing to really complain about. Loftstruck Lesser Demon is a White Day variant of Lesser Demon Cat. Rather than dealing insane damage, he has a 30% chance of knocking back, freezing, slowing, or weakening units for 2.5 seconds. Due to the lack of true form and especially talents, the difference in ranking from this version and the original Lesser Demon is huge. This unit is really fun to use, though it's best to use him in stages where peons don't spawn as much. Once you find a stage though, Loftstruck Lesser Demon will juggle the few enemies in the stage while dealing huge damage. Though again, the lack of true forms and talents make him weaker compared to other melees. Raiden is another underrated Uber with his ability being able to guarantee a knockback against Red and be strong against them. Against Red, he'll do about 11,000 damage per second with a health of above 100,000. It's amazing and all, but the existence of Courier Cat knocked Raiden a few pegs down in the ranking. He's still a good Red damager and a crowd controller. Narita is a backlander who has a big health along with a guaranteed chance to slow Black and zombies for half their uptime, and has a 25% chance to land a savage blow. Against Black, they have a lot of competition, though zombies is a completely different story as their decent range and health help her do a good job of crowd controlling, though she can only reposition herself once. Overall, a good anti-zombie who crowd controls them and occasionally deals huge damages due to their savage blow. Eva Unit 13 is a decent backlander with immunity to Surge, strong against Aku, and a small bonus of spawning some mini surges. His main usage is being a ranged anti-Aku as he does a decent amount of damage for his range, but his immune to Surge can be used outside of Aku's as it's still a rare immunity, leaving a small spotlight for Eva Unit 13. Princess Kaguya's first form can be entirely ignored, although her first form is a good metal crowd controller. Her main selling point is her true form, where she gains the ability of Metal Killer, meaning that she'll take a percentage of the metal's current health in each hit she lands, 12% to be exact. This means that in a couple of hits, she's able to take chunks of metal's health no matter the amount. This truly gives her the name of the Metal Killer. But it needs to be said that as much as metals are hated, there's not many stages where they become a genuine problem. Not saying that Kaguya is bad, it's simply saying that Kaguya's power can't be expressed as metals don't appear in serious stages. Though if you developed anger issues towards them like me, she may be worth a Dark Cat size in stone. Frosty Kai is a Christmas variant of the original Kai, though she's able to resist Angel and Alien instead. Angels can be thrown out since ramen exists, though Aliens, she can surprisingly have her time to shine. Due to her cheap cat fruit cost, you can unlock her true form quickly and able to throw her in stages containing aliens. She can take 100,000 damage from them, which is incredible with her fast recharge. Though offense is more praised than defense in the battle cats, in late game, there will be enemies strong enough to deal chunks of damage to Kai even with the resist. Along with stages being more common, Frosty Kai falls more irrelevant as you progress, though she's still surprisingly a good anti-alien tanker. Theoden Maria is a fragile red nuker with immunity to waves. Against red, he deals a surprising 30,000 damage per second in a 370 range. With his immunity to waves, he's a perfect counter to Berserkery, along with other red melees. But as said, Theoden Maria is fragile and should be taken care as he only has a health of 29,000 health, which is extremely low. Eva Unit 08 is a backlander who has a long pierce with multiple small chances of landing an ability, specifically against floating. They have a 20% chance to either knock back, freeze, and or weaken floating enemies for 4 seconds, which is an uptime of 50%. Having an uptime of 50% while having a pierce of up to 350 is what justifies the ranking of Eva Unit 08, as when they debuff a floating, it's for a decent amount of time. They also have a decent health, standing range, and a good amount of knockbacks, making their usage more secured. Still, since the debuffs are 20% chance each, you may not receive a debuff you specifically wanted. A Dark Hero's anti-alien in Aku with all forms having an advantage. First form having half a chance to freeze both traits and or pierce shields. Although the uptime for the freeze is okayish and neither are guaranteed, Aku is still a new trait, so there's no other replacement for freezing Akus. Second form, he's strong against Aku and Alien with immunity to waves. You can simply just use him for immunity to waves as his strong against isn't good due to his raw damage just being a bit too low. His true form is his real potential, being able to deal massive damage against Aku enemies with half a chance of breaking shield. And alongside that, he's the only unit in the Violeted Chivalry combo where the massive damage increases by 10%, which is nice. Their damage per second is still a bit small for a nuker, even if we apply the massive damage, but as said before, there isn't really that much competition for anti-Aku Ubers. Shidakiri Sparrow is an anti-angel in Aku with the ability to guarantee a level 2 mini wave and curse against them for a near 90% uptime, alongside immunity to Surge. Sadly, all of his stats are too low for him to make any impact, just like White Knight Cyclops. Though similarly to him, he's a part of a single slot combo, that being Bustin' Phantoms, where it decreases the recharge time of other units by 0.87 seconds, which is generally a big difference. Players will unlock his true form solely for the purpose of the Cat combo, as it literally saves you an extra slot for any other unit, rather than having to use 2 units for a small research combo. Yuletide Nurse is a Christmas variant of Nurse Cat, with having half a chance of knocking back and or slowing angels, aliens, and Akus for an uptime of around 66%. She's simply a crowd controller against the semi-power creep traits, though against Aku, she isn't as good as she isn't immune to searches, which are common in those traits, and lacks shield piercing, which some could argue you can simply add a shield breaker unit. Overall, a good job at crowd controlling the 3 traits. Balrog, not to be confused with Lesser Demon Cat's true form Balrog Cat, is another underrated unit from the Street Fighter collab. He's unique as he's extremely cheap to be sent out with what he has to offer. Balrog attacks only red, black, and zombie, though in return, Balrog deals a decent 11,000 damage per second against these units. He's best used in the start of zombie stages or outbreaks, but can be used outside of those stages due to his variety of trade. His recharge is long, and sometimes it's best he gets specific Ubers that focus on one trait in return of a stronger ability, though Balrog still has places where he can shine. Madoka Kanama is a backliner who has a long distance with a Pierce of 250. Alongside that, she's strong and floating with a guaranteed chance of slowing them for near half her uptime. Her range and damage output is nice, though strong guns doesn't fit for a backliner as they don't really need to take enemies due to their standing range. A massive damage would have been better. Still, Madoka is a decent backliner who you can use outside of floating stages to deal with backline enemies. Hallowindy is a Halloween version of Windy, with her target being switched for Alien. Since Hallowindy doesn't have a true form nor talents, her true potential hasn't yet been reached. Still, she deals a decent 16,000 damage per second against Alien, with an acceptable 435 range, so she can still be put to good use. Holy Phoenix is a mid-range crowd controller who's strong against floating, black, and alien, as well as a guaranteed freeze against those 3 traits for near half his uptime. He does a decent job at his role, especially in mixed stages, though most would rather bring a super rare or rare that can do the same job. Even if he does low damage with the strong against, a guaranteed freeze is still a guaranteed freeze. White Butler Vigler is a White Day variant of Detective Vigler, with his guaranteed level 3 wave attack and notably half a chance of piercing shields, and or freezing Black and Aku for near half his uptime. Vigler is known for having a concerningly long attack animation, and though the same can be said for his White Day variant, if you take proper care of White Butler in the field, he can do some serious change in the battle. His immunity to Surge is also nice, especially since he targets Aku, though even with the reward, most players would rather take a safer alternative. Reindeer Tarun is a Christmas variant of the original Tarun, being able to guarantee knockback against Black and Alien as well as having strong against them. She's also given Colossus Slayer. She's best used against aliens as she guarantees a knockback on each hit, but thankfully her attack frequency isn't too fast to the point where she makes other units miss. Her strongness is nice, as well as her decently fast recharge time. View her as a better alternative to Twin Stars. Kaguya of the Coast is better than her original variant, which is Princess Kaguya. Her first form can be ignored as Black is power crept and aliens are known for their backliner. Her main selling point is her true form, which she guarantees a slow against Black, Alien, and Aku for 40% of her uptime, as well as half a chance of instantly piercing shields. There isn't that many backliners who not only break Aku shields, but also crowd control them at the same time, so that's what makes her better than previous anti-Aku Ubers. Though should be said that due to her 50% chance of the shield being pierced, you'll usually have her pierce shields each 18 seconds due to her semi-slow attack frequency. The final and best Uber from the Power Pro Baseball collab. Subaru is a backliner with a long distance that pierces up to 200 with the ability of strong against red and angel enemies. His decent standing range of 425 and pierce of 200 is his biggest appeal since 4,500 damage per second is decent compared to his range. And against red and angel, he performs a better job as he does 8,000 damage per second against them, which is good especially with the pierce. Shinji Cat is an Evangelion variant of Baby Cat who shares near identical stats to them, with the main difference being attack frequency and target. The targets can be ignored as neither Baby Cat variants are used for their targeting. Rather, their melee stats and level 2 wave. The reason why Shinji Cat is this early in the ranking compared to Baby Cat is due to their attack frequency being faster in exchange for lesser attack power. Though both Baby Cat and Shinji Cat have the same damage per second, due to them having melee stats, Shinji won't be able to land more hits than Baby, as they'll both perish in the field quickly, resulting in Shinji dealing less damage than his original counterpart. Also, little things such as slower speed, no true form, or talents draw Shinji further back to this ranking. Still, if you have Shinji Cat, he can still be a good knockoff of Baby Cat. Mystery Girl Yuki is a backliner nuker who deals massive damage against floating enemies and nothing more. She does her job well, though due to her semi-long attack animation and frequency, she may have some problems as Ku, though not as much. Still, her 19,000 damage per second against floating is welcome. Ice Cat is a ranged crowd controller against Red who in her true form guarantees a freeze against them for a near 75% uptime. Many will mention how she can be easily replaced by Ice Cat, and while in some scenarios it's true, a unit that guarantees a freeze against Red in a 425 range can still be useful for Red, and especially in mixed stages containing Red. Oda Nobunaga is a ranged anti-black droughted first 3 forms with a guaranteed chance of perma-freezing them. Farmer Cat clears, though what gets him this high is his ultra form where he gains Aku typing as well as having the ability to counter surge, which means that if he gets hit by an enemy surge, he will spawn a surge with the exact same level, damage, and opposite location. This is his main appeal, but it needs to be said that he will still receive damage from the surges he'll get hit by. So if there's too many of them, he will easily get knocked out, and to be honest, as much as enemy surges are hated, there's other alternatives to countering surge than spending 50 Dark Cat size on an ultra form. His guaranteed chance of freezing Aku is more than welcoming, though sadly he can't pierce shields, though it can be argued that his decent damage of 10,000 per second alone can break the shields. In the end, if you're having a genuine difficult time with Akus and have 15 Dark Cat size to spend, he may be a good option. Ramasao Tome is a backliner who has a long distance with a pierce of 150, a guaranteed chance of freezing Black and Angel for a 25% uptime, and finally immunity to surge. The freeze should be viewed as a bonus, and the only benefit she'll have is her immunity to surge, since there really isn't much of a competition for backliners with that ability. In the end, she's a basic, decent backliner who's immune to surge. Mighty Author is a mid-range nuker against zombies, who deals insane damage against them. If we include the insane damage, Author will be dealing 12,000 damage against them, which is amazing, though for a range of 370, it's a bit too risky and not as rewarding. Thankfully in his true form, he's given a 30% chance to dodge attacks from zombies, and in general, has a fast recharge time. His talent of Soul Strike is also nice if you want a unit that clears all the zombies that are temporarily dead. T-Short Kai is a black and zombie tanker and nothing more. Since she has a low health due to the lack of a true form, she won't last very long in the field. The good thing though is that both of her traits don't have other Ubers that can tank them in the front line, so she'll mostly be your only option if you ever need a unit that can tank either traits. The exclusive Uber from the Royal Fest. Princess Cat is a backliner who guarantees a level 6 mini wave and a weaken against Red, Angels, and zombies for more than half her uptime. She should be best treated similarly to Emperor Cat, where she isn't your main Uber, rather an Uber who'd make sure enemies won't push further. Her range in mini wave is nice as she guarantees a small wave in a safe distance. She's overall a well-performing generalist. The only Uber from the Mola collab and was considered one of the worst Ubers before the talents given to him. Mola King is a backliner who deals a decent amount of damage in return for an extremely fragile health. As said, his talents of an 80% chance to dodge attacks from any enemy makes it so that he can hypothetically become invincible in the field. His level 5 mini wave surge also doubles his attack with his decent spawn range that can even hit enemy backliner. Should be said that even with a high 80% chance of dodging, there's still a chance of the dodge not occurring, resulting in a quick death. So if you're willing to risk it, it can be a decent ranged Uber that can reach enemies with different ranges. Luke is one of the newer Ubers from the Street Fighter collab, with the ability of being strong against traded enemies, a 5% chance of a Savage Blow, and a 10% chance of piercing shield. He's instantly comparable to Gao, which is praised for being an amazing generalist, though Luke's disadvantage is the fact that he only has an attack range of 400 compared to Gao's 470. Luke's chance to pierce is too low to be relied upon, and the Savage Blow should be treated as a bonus. With those flaws aside, Luke becomes a viable generalist that deals over 8,000 damage per second and can take over 100,000 damage from traded throughout your battle. Hates the Punisher is the definition of a wall, where he has a raw health of 425,000. He's a good tanker against any stages where you need a wall in order to not let the enemies progress further. The reason why he's a bit early in the ranking though is because a generalist tanker doesn't really fit in the meta the Battle Cast is currently in. So the few stages where he works, he performs a great job at. Cat Machine is a tanker against Red and Alien, with his true form being able to block waves. His ability to block waves can be set aside as Octopus Cat can and will perform a better job at blocking the wave. Being a tanker against Red and Alien is nice, as Red is known for having heavy hits, and as for Aliens, sometimes Rover doesn't do his job right, so it can be nice to throw Cat Machine in. Ultra talents can be ignored, though his immunity to knockback and his normal talents can be useful if you have a difficult time countering energy. Overall, a decent tanker against the traits he's against. Wolfshell DL is a ranged unit who has a 3 multi-hit and a 40% chance of knocking back Angels and Aliens. Her stats will be the main reason you'll be bringing her in your loadout, as she deals 7,500 damage per second in a standing range of 415. Plus, her knockback against Angels and Aliens is a decent bonus. Hatsune Miku 16 is a mid-ranger who's strong against Black, guarantees a slow, and level 2 surge attack. Against Black, she does a fine enough job, but her biggest pro is the level 2 surge that can spawn with 400 more than her standing range. It deals 5,000 damage per second. That surge shouldn't be ignored, though with that said, she still does have a low range, although they gave her a decent amount of health. Huntress Tarun is a ranged crowd controller who guarantees a slow against Red and Alien for around an 80% uptime, has a 20% chance to land the Savage Blow, has Colossus Slayer, and in her true form, gains strong against in her true target. She does a good job crowd controlling both Red and Alien. Her Savage Blow puts them in place even more, and in her recent true form of strong against makes her even more stronger. With Colossus Slayer, she'll do a good job against both Baron Seal and Hippo. All in all, she's a good anti-red and blue, though if you want me to give you a reason on why I ranked her this early, it's mostly because her stats are weaker compared to the next Ubers, and both Red and Alien have many Ubers that can counter them. Kenshin is a specialist with a decent range and strong against Black with a guaranteed chance of knocking them back. Black is extremely power crept by Pizza and Bomber Cat, so there's less appeal in using her for Black. Her main appeal though is her talents, which grants her the ability to target Relic, which is one of the more demanding traits for Ubers to counter. If you're in demand for an anti-Relic damager and crowd controller, Kenshin may be a good pick. Mighty Bomber is most known for guaranteeing a knockback against zombies constantly. In stages besides the Infected King, he can constantly push back zombies, which is good since they are one of the traits that push back the hardest, especially with their barrow. Their Soul Strike talent is also good as he'll constantly push back the temporarily dead zombies, giving you more time to spawn in new units. All in all, a decent anti-zombie Uber that Big Sal has developed PTSD from. Trickster is a backlander crowd controller who has half a chance of slowing floating and angels with a 90% uptime. Her multi-unit helps her have a better chance of landing the debuff against those traits, and stats-wise she'll do some good damage while in a safe standing range. What makes her a better unit is her relic target that she received in her talents, unlocking new opportunities. Overall, a good crowd controller against her traits. Archer is a backlander who pierces up to 300 and is immune to waves. That's about all he has. A good backlander who would chip the health of every enemy of the field with immunity to wave. Pretty good honestly. Ninja Girl Tomo is a unique unit with having a 50% chance to freeze traitless and Aku enemies for half her uptime. Those two units are currently the most demanding traits, giving her room to shine. Her long distance multi-hit can reach upwards of 430 pierce, though it's just 1/3 of her damage and it leaves a small gap where she doesn't hit, though it doesn't become a big enough problem. Her half uptime and 50% chance decreases the time Aku and traitless will be frozen, which is why she isn't that high up. Overall, she does a good enough job against two of the most needed anti-traits. A Dragon Emperor unit who guarantees a knockback and slow to traitless enemies for 55% uptime. Since he targets traitless, he competes with less Ubers, thus giving him a bigger lead in the ranking. It's just funny how a Uber's target can change the value of them entirely. Crazed Yuki is a nuker who deals massive damage against red and black enemies. With her massive damage, she deals 19,000 damage per second against them. She outcompetes Mystery Girl Yuki since Crazed has more traits she can go against. Though something to keep in mind is that Crazed Yuki behaves similarly to Ku, where she has a long attack frequency and animation as her, though not as bad. But make sure you don't have any units that push back the enemies, as that could make Crazed Yuki miss. Bunny and Canard is an Easter variant to Warlock and Pierre, with the difference being typing, which Bunny and Canard aims on damaging red and either black, zombie, or Aku, depending on the form. All their forms are good, as Bunny deals a decent 14,000 damage per second against these enemies. Though just like the original variant, that's the only traits they can attack, though they can only work in stages that contain these traits. In their third form, they attack only red and Aku, though they're also given Surge immunity, which is nice since Akus are known to spawn surges. And Bunny Canard can just whoop energy whenever they feel like it. Overall, a unit that limits itself, though in return does a great job for when he works. Mattshea is a ranged Uber who is strong against floating and has a guaranteed chance to freeze them for half her time. Her stats are right and all, and she does a genuine good job against floating, but in her talents, she's given a new typing of Relic, as well as immunity to curse. There isn't many Ubers that can freeze Relic, let alone guarantee the freeze, so this lets Mattshea shine, and with her strong against, her survivability increases to over 120,000 HP against floating and Relic, a good collab Uber that's worth spending NP on. A good crowd controller against Alien with being resistance against them and a guaranteed chance of breaking their shield, along knockbacking them and slowing them for near half her uptime. She does a good job in making sure no alien gets close to your units. The theory of the Mistley syndrome, where Mistley can possibly push back the enemy so hard to the point that your units can get into the alien's backliner's range, thus your units dying quicker, has been overly exaggerated and rarely does it actually ever occur. Just overall, a genuinely good anti-alien crowd controller. Raida's ability to freeze angels for more than half her uptime is an ability that is uncommon, which places her high in this list. Also, due to her 71% recharge time, you may even be able to permanently freeze angels if you time the new Rider right. A Uber with an amazing ability, though her not so long range limits her quite a bit. Coppermine is a ranged anti-floating who has a 75% chance of freezing floatings for an uptime of 88%. To be honest, she does a decent job in her role. Of course, due to her not having a guarantee, there may be some times where she gets unlucky and her ability doesn't activate. Nonetheless, her decent range and fast recharge allows her to be stacked, and if you want to spend 15 Dark Kasli and NP, her mini search can make it so that her freeze can have the entire uptime of her attack frequency. An underrated uber where her ability is surprisingly decent. Coastal Explorer Kana is a beach variant to the original Kana, being able to deal massive damage against floating and alien with a guaranteed chance of spawning a level 1 surge. She surprisingly works well against her traits, as Coastal Kana has a long distance multi-hit, where her third hit can land 600 further than her standing range, which is amazing, though it's only 1/3 of her damage. She's good against floating and especially alien, as she'll stand in a safe range while her last hit can chip away the alien backliner's health. All the while the surge is taking big chunks of the health on mid-range enemies. Overall, a good summer uber. Booth's main selling point is being a big backliner that has a long distance with a pierce of 350. She'll simply be used as a backliner that can hit anyone on the stage from melee to backlined enemies, as a 350 pierce is huge for her decent damage. Bull Rider Vars is a good crowd controller against zombies and aliens, as he guarantees a knockback and slow against them for the entire uptime. He does a good job at crowd controlling zombies and aliens, and although zombies may barrel onto his range to deal damage, his consistent attack frequency and guaranteed knockback and slow will give zombies a hard time. Zombie killer and half a chance of a barrier breaker is nice to have as well. One of the more underrated War God Ubers. Yoshimoto is a ranged crowd controller with a pierce of 250, strong against flag, and a guaranteed chance of weakening them for the entire uptime. Bomber Cat mostly covers crowd control, though Yoshimoto's permanent weaken shouldn't be completely swept under the rug, as his pierce can reach to even backline enemies. His talents also improve him, as he's given Aku typing, which allows him to be strong against them with the near permanent weaken as well. With his strong, he'll mostly likely outlive the searches Aku will draw, though due to their shields, he may not be able to weaken the Aku backliners properly. Still, a heavily underestimated uber. A ranged tanker whose resistance against black, aliens, and zombies. Sakura's main advantage is her ability to soul strike, as it allows her to get rid of the temporarily dead zombies and can tank them and finish them off if they manage to survive. Her other counters are nice too, though the semi-long recharge time may leave you with no Sakura on the field if there's huge damage dealers. Lost World Yuki is another ranged nuker from the Toshi collab, where her traits are angels and aliens, with the bonus of a guarantee to break barriers. The barrier breaker is nice, as it allows her to land her hit even if the alien she targets has a barrier. Both angel and alien is nice, as her 16,000 damage per second helps her deal good chunks of damage against her. Aku typing from her talents can be ignored, as she likes immune to surge, which makes her very risky to bring in Aku stages. Still, she's a great angel and alien damage dealer. The first and only English exclusive Uber. Dachi is once again another ranged nuker who deals massive damage against floating and angels, with a guaranteed slow for an uptime of 25%. She deals 18,000 damage per second against the traits, which is great if we include the small slow bonus. Just another simple nuker. Another nuker, though Osaka Miku focuses on red and angel, has a tiny bit better range compared to the last two, and has the chance to land a savage blow from her 3 multi-hit, which gives her a bigger damage per second. She does her job a-okay. Air is a long-distance alien specialist who has resistance against alien and guarantees break-in barriers, and upon Ultra Form, guarantees knockback against them. Before Ultra Form, thanks to their 275 pierce, they'll make sure no alien in the field has a barrier, plus get their health chipped away. Now once Ultra Forms, their pierce increases to 325, meaning that nearly all aliens will get knocked back, thus giving you the ground. One of the better Ultra Forms for when you just want to get rid of aliens, though the requirements for unlocking the form is what draws them back. Eva Unit 00 is well known for being one of the first ranged Ubers with a wave shield. With a range of 350, he's able to block all waves while getting hit less than the common wave shield unit, Octopus Cat. This sounds amazing at first, though due to his extremely low recharge time of 174 seconds, even with the resistance against floating and angels, you're still at risk at losing Eva Unit 00, which if knocked out, you'll have no other wave shield unit on the field unless you bring another one such as Octopus. But then at that point, just only bring him. That isn't to say he has no room to shine, far from it. It's just a reason why he's this low for an extremely unique ability. One of the more underestimated Ubers from the Almighties, Poseidon is a ranged rusher with a guaranteed chance of freezing metals and zombies for half his uptime. His talents give him dodge and savage blow, which makes him more viable in stages as he has a greater survivability and damage. His job in freezing is decent as his guarantee, but his half uptime is a bit sluggish. The small problem with Poseidon is his overall small DPS, even with the savage blow, due to his 350 range. Still, he's a nice unit to have as he does a decent job at his role. Benevolent Soma is a satisfying ranged crowd controller with the guaranteed chance of slowing and weakening floating, angel, and alien for an uptime of 66%. Since he's given 3 traits, his usage expands, and though Sanso does exist for angel and floating, a ranged guaranteed slow and weaken uber is not common. His alien target is also really nice. Tokyo Miku is another uber with the unique ability of Wave Shield while being resistant to Red and Angel. The reason why Tokyo Miku surpasses Evo Unit 00 is due to her faster cooldown and resistance to Red rather than floating, since Octopus already fills the spot for anti-floating Wave Shields, thus weakening Eva's usage. Tokyo Miku will do a fine enough job to block waves, so just bringing Octopus is more relevant in some instances. A generally decent Conjurer Uber who guarantees a knockback against Black and Angel with half a chance of spawning a Surge. His attack animation is a bit long, but thanks to his long distance that pierces up to 250, he will more than likely land the hit even if the front enemies get knocked back. His guaranteed knockback is amazing since it will hit most of Angels and Blacks, resulting in amazing crowd controlling. And the half a chance of a Surge can be nice if the enemies manage to get into Mitsu's blind spot. His Spirit guarantees the knockback, which adds more to his crowd controlling. Overall, a good unit who makes Black and Angel's enemies easier to handle. Vars is a Dragon Empress Uber who has half a chance of knocking back and or slowing Black enemies for his full uptime. Since he's decently ranged with 460 standing range, he can crowd control decently against ranged Black even if you have Bomber Cat. His biggest usage comes from his talents where he can target Relic. There really isn't much units in general who can constantly crowd control Relic in such a safe standing range, hence why he's this high in this ranking. A decent crowd controller against Relic and Black who isn't too expensive to unlock for its useful perks. Urashima Taro is a tanky mid-range Uber whose resistance against Black and Angel. Due to his amazing cord of 500,000 health, he'll more than likely always stay on the field, shipping the enemy's health. There really isn't anything else to mention about him, as he'll always be a safe bet to bring, dealing a decent amount of damage every now and then. Simply a good tanky generalist. Kunio-kun being the exclusive Uber from the River City collab is a melee in his first form and a backliner in his second form. His stats can be ignored as his main usage comes to his combo, Don't Mess With Me, giving +2 levels to your wallet at the start of the stage with no cost. This is extremely useful in situations where money is tight, as Kunio can boost your wallet and generate you money quicker, especially in the Arena of Honor and Cat Claw Dojo. The unit itself isn't even half bad, as their backliner usage can help you chip away enemies' health little by little. Overall, a decent unit with an amazing cat combo. Super Devil is a great crowd controller who can guarantee a slow against Angels for 75% uptime, which pierces up to 250 thanks to his long range. He's given an insane 550 standing range, which will let him land his hits safely. A great Angel crowd controller overall. Anubis is a generalist with a standing range of 425 who's immune to waves, knockback, and slow. His stats are decent, though his talents is where his true potential unlocks. He's given search immunities, which makes him a search immune generalist, which is something we don't really have, so it gives him leeway. Talents also give him a 30% chance to spawn a level 1 search attack, which is decent, though with level 260, he's given ultra talents with his main one being a faster attack frequency. This faster attack frequency lets him have a quicker chance of spawning a search along with stacking his general damage per second. If you fully max search attack buff, and attack frequency, you have a wave and surge immune generalist who can deal 33,000 damage per second, which is insane. Of course, this all comes with a hefty price of NP and Dark Cat size, though he's definitely one of the better Ubers to invest your cat size in NP on. Light Mother Acid is a mid-range Uber who guarantees a level 2 wave per hit, increases her damage 50% on her first knockback, and has Colossus Slayer. With her wave and strengthen stacked, she deals 10,500 damage per second, with 5,000 damage per second in a 230 pierce thanks to her level 2 wave. Honestly, her wave is what carries her, as she just constantly lands those waves and gets rid of peons and deals damage against bigger enemies. Her Colossus Slayer isn't too much to write home about, as she gets mostly outranged. Overall, a decent waiver. An amazing anti-red angel half nuker half crowd controller, as when their strong and strengthen is applied, they deal 14,000 damage per second against red and angel, and with Colossus Slayer 24,000 damage per second, which is decent for having a quick recharge time of 81 seconds. His immunity to waves is good for his targets, and the 30% chance of knocking back red and angels is just a good crowd control every now and then. Overall, a good red and angel remover. Gravi is an alien tanker who with resistance against them guarantees breaking barriers and guarantees a level 4 wave attack. His wave attack is amazing, as if landed, it will deal 30,000 damage to nearly every enemy in the field, which is amazing. Against alien, his resistance, warp, and wave immunity and guaranteed barrier breaker will help you fight off aliens a hefty amount. All in all, a good alien tanker and waiver. Kalisa is a zombie rusher who deals massive damage against them. With a range of 340, she deals an insane 28,000 damage per second, which is just insane. Sadly, since zombies barrow, she will more than likely die before you're able to spawn another Kalisa, so the 28,000 DPS is just too much to ignore. If rolled, you should invest in her with Uber Cat size, as her amazing damage per second will help you clear out any zombies she outranges. Aoshi is a long-range uber who can pierce upwards of 250, with being able to be strong against floating in angels as well as having half a chance of freezing them for 86% uptime. His main usage comes down to freeze, as though it's only half a chance, 6 seconds of freezing with a pierce of 250 is too good to pass up. His strongest is used more as a survivability, which will help him get to over 100,000 health against the trades. Overall, a bit of a risky yet extremely rewarding crowd controller. Sweet Aphrodite, being a Valentine's variant of Aphrodite, has her target switched from massive against alien to massive against red and black. She deals 12,000 damage per second against red and black with an insane pierce of 300, which is amazing, though there isn't much red and black backliners for her ability to be fully used. She still does an amazing job against the semi-rare red and black backliners though. Tropical Kalisa is a summer variant of Kalisa, with her targets being switched for red rather than angel. Against red, she deals 28,000 damage per second. The main reason why Tropical Kalisa surpasses Floral Kalisa is due to her typing, as though red is one of the more power crept targets. Having a mid-ranger who deals 28,000 damage per second clears most of the anti-red units. Red is also known for being melee, so her role fits more against them. Overall, a great anti-red mid-range nuker. Nekoluga is a backliner who's immune to waves and triples their damage on the first knockback. He's given an insane 100 knockbacks, which increases his survivability. Once the strengthen is activated, which is easy to activate as even small pianos can make him knock back, he can deal a decent 9,000 damage per second. With his immunity to waves, he can do an amazing job in stages where octopus may have a hard time blocking waves. Sadly, his potential gets locked from surges and enemies with long range, since as said before, he has 100 knockbacks, which can be viewed as a double-edged sword, as since he can reposition many times, anything that hits him will cancel his attack. Overall, a safe unit to bring that can deal chunks of damage if left unbothered. King Taro is an Ultra Souls Uber with being able to slow and land savage blows from his 3-part multi-hit and long distance. In his first form, he can be viewed as an angel variant of Housewife, where he slows and even savage blows against angels, which is generally nice. In his true form, he becomes a backliner with half a chance of slowing and or cursing angels for an uptime of 60 to 75% uptime. Thanks to his 3-part multi-hit, he'll more than likely activate those abilities. Curse is niche as the uptime isn't permanent, so it loses value, though it can be viewed as a bonus. Slow on angels is amazing since it has an uptime of 75%, which is welcomed, especially with 250 pierce. In the end, a wonderful crowd controller against angels that deals good amount of damage to them. The biggest glow up any Uber has ever received. Jupiter King is part of the Metal Select collab, where he has half a chance of knockbacking and or slowing enemies for an uptime of 60%. He's also given guaranteed shield breaking and more notably, a level 1 surge attack. Jupiter King can be viewed as a better range and even long distance melee, since the surge spawn will more than likely spawn outside his standing range. If both surge and attack stack, he deals 9,000 damage per second, which is amazing with the other abilities he's given. A great alien crowd controller and can even be used as a ranged surge generalist, since his true form is extremely cheap to unlock. One of the more underrated Ubers from the Evangelion collab, Wonder is an angel and zombie nuker who deals 26,000 damage per second against them. With a range of 400 and amazing survivability, he will constantly deal 26,000 for most of the battle, which is astonishing. Simply an amazing angel and zombie nuker who should be praised more often. Rabbit Satoru is a backliner who guarantees slow against traitless for 57% uptime with a long distance that pierces upwards of 300. A long distance guaranteed crowd controller against traitless is amazing, as he'll slow all the annoying traitless enemies that keep bothering you. He's given immunity to waves, which is pretty decent as traitless is one of the more common targets who spawn waves. Having a 50% uptime though can sometimes not be enough to fully crowd control, and his inner long distance is only 100, the common being 150, meaning that enemies may easily get into his blind spot, though that rarely ever happens, and with his uptime problem, thanks to his 84-second recharge time, another one can be spawned, and if put out correctly, your 2 Rabbit Saturos can permanently slow all traitless. Overall, a wonderful traitless crowd controller. Detective Vigler is mostly used for his astonishing cat combo, Cheating Hard, where when paired up with Sumo Cat, decreases the recharge time of all cats by 1.7 seconds. The combo can make rare to super rare cats quicker to spawn out, making them extremely powerful, such as Ramen or Cameraman Cat. The closest cat combos that mimic the Cheating Heart is Biohazard and Bony Bone, though those require 3 slots rather than 2, and sometimes that 1 slot difference can be the difference between a victory or a loss. Vigler itself is okay, since his long attack animation and lack of pierce makes him more likely to miss. So when he hits, it can be very rewarding thanks to his level 3 wave attack. All in all, a decent Uber with an insane combo. Nami being part of the Elemental Pixie set is resistance against Alien and Aku, with being able to guarantee barrier breaking and weakening them for half his uptime. His stats are good and all, but his biggest usage comes down to his wave blocking ability. Thanks to his fast recharge time and typing along with his weakening, he surpasses all the other wave blockers in the ranking. Easily the best wave blocking Uber and a good tanker against Alien and Aku. The 6th Angel is one of the funnest Ubers to use in the entire game, as they're a backliner who does massive damage against floating, guarantees to slow on them for 10% uptime, and guarantees the level 3 surge. He's given long distance in which can pierce to an astonishing 1000. He'll behave as a literal nuke that deals 34,000 damage to all enemies each 22 seconds. Against floating, he deals 6,000 damage per second, that again reaches up to 1,000 pierce, and though the surge spawn is extremely long, thus being unreliable, if it manages to land on floatings, it can deal over 500,000 damage, which is insane. His biggest problem comes to survivability, as though he's given 500 range, which is great and all, he only has 25,000 health and 1 knockback. He's given half a chance to dodge floating enemies, though that's very situational. Alongside his extremely long cooldown, he's one of the more fragile units. In the end, the 6th Angel is an extremely fragile, yet extremely rewarding Uber. Quirk on Saki is the summer variant of Saki, who only targets 2 specific traits in return for her insane stats. The first 2 forms can be ignored as her true form is her real usage. On her true form, she can only attack floating and angels as well as be strong against them. Once the strong is applied, she does an astonishing 14,000 damage per second. That damage is already amazing considering her standing range being a whopping 600 and a long distance that can pierce upwards of 300, which is amazing. She has a quick cooldown of 58 seconds, which means that you can have 2 or even 3 Sakis in the loadout if you protect the front line enough. Of course, as said, she can only target these 2 traits, which means her usage gets limited to the stages that have majority of their enemies in these traits. Overall, an amazing specialized backliner nuker. Little Valkyrie is a generalist ranged rusher having a standing range of 345 and 11,000 damage per second. Her stats are amazing as she can be thrown in and do some hefty damage, and thanks to her zombie killer, chance of barrier breaking, immunity to waves, knockback, freeze, slow, weaken, warp, and curse, many stages are open for her to handle incredibly. Her health may be fragile, though thankfully she's given a quick recharge time of 51 seconds. A great ranged generalist rusher who manages to handle a difficult role. Takeda Shigen is another Uber who can only attack 2 traits, those being Black and Alien. He's able to deal 17,000 damage per second in a safe 470 range with a health of over 100,000, which that alone makes him amazing, though his talents unlock his bigger potential. Attack buff usually hasn't been mentioned in other Ubers, though since his damage comes from raw power, it's good to max out as his attack buff increases his damage to an insane 20,000 damage per second. The bigger talent though is targeting angels, which opens up so many opportunities with his insane raw damage. That's not all though. If you level him up to level 60, his ultra talents are unlocked, allowing you to buy 3 new typings, those being Red, Aku, and Zombie. At level 60 with the attack buff applied, he deals an insane 38,000 damage per second. Now against zombies, it can be sadly ignored as he doesn't have Zombie Killer, making him difficult to use. Against Red, he does an incredible job against them, same with Aku. This all sounds incredible, but it comes down with the cost of 15 Dark Kasli and a lot of NP. Though if you're willing to spend that amount, he can be a powerful generalist. Many people would rather choose a different counter against the traits and the ultra talents though. Heavy Jack is a ranged tanker whose resistance against Red and Aku enemies, while guaranteeing a knockback against them and have half a chance of breaking Aku's shield. His guaranteed knockback and resistance will make him always crowd control no matter how chaotic the stage can get. The shield break is also a nice bonus as most Aku enemies come with shield, allowing Heavy Jack to push them back even if they have a shield. Heavy Jack also comes in a 3-slot cat combo, Wicked Flames, which boosts all cats health by 20%, which is wonderful. Overall, a simply good ranged crowd controller. Chun-Li is a mid-range heavy hitter who has a 3-part multi-hit that has a 40% chance of knocking back Red, Black, and aliens in each hit. She has an insane 20,000 raw damage per second, which is crazy, though in exchange, she only has single attack. Still, in stages where there's little to no peons, she can do an amazing job in those. Her knockback is also nice, as it can push back enemies that get too close to her due to her having a semi-short range. All in all, a great heavy hitter who strives in stages with little to no peons. Iwans is a great mid-range generalist who guarantees a level 2 wave attack, survives the lethal strike, and has a 50% chance to land a savage blow. His guaranteed level 2 wave attack is amazing as his damage stacks up to 11,000 damage per second, with half of that piercing nearly to 200. The savage blow can be treated as a bonus, though if it lands, it can deal huge amounts of damage which can pierce to enemies, dealing 75,000 damage. His immunity to waves makes him one of the better immune to wave generalists compared to the previous Ubers. In general, he's a wonderful generalist that can be brought to many stages. Sakura Miku is a backliner who guarantees a freeze against aliens for 52% uptime that can pierce up to 250 thanks to her long distance. As mentioned before, aliens are well known for being backliners, and though 42% doesn't seem like a big deal at first, that small freeze time can make a huge difference as it slows the annoying alien backliners. The small chance of a barrier breaker is also nice and all, just a wonderful crowd controller that fits perfectly against her trade. Thundia is a simple nuker who deals massive damage against red. Once the massive damage is applied, she does 21,000 damage per second against them. So thanks to her talents, she's given Strengthen, which increases her damage 50% once half a health, which results in 32,000 damage per second, which is pretty good actually. Her curse immunity from her talent is wonderful since it lets her do her nuker job at relic and red mixed stages. It's her simple availability that makes her better than other units. She doesn't need no ultra form or ultra talents. She does her job well for a bit of cat fruit and NP. Teammate Ruri is a great mid-range tanker against red and within talents, Relic. Against the trades, she has 480 to 600,000 health, which is amazing, as she deals 12,000 damage per second, though in return, she's given single attack. She's also given Weaken, which lasts her full uptime, which essentially doubles her health, which is amazing once more. In the end, she's best used in stages where there isn't many peons, as she'll weaken the big enemies permanently and tank their hits for your other worthy units. Little Valkyrie Dark is the same as Little Valkyrie, with her special abilities being exchanged for a guaranteed level 3 wave attack and immunity to wave. The wave attack is what solely makes her superior, as she can deal around 6,000 damage per second that can nearly pierce up to 400 and 12,000 damage per second in her standing range, which is wonderful. Thankfully, she has kept her most important immunity, waves, which makes her an amazing counter for enemies who deal them. In the end, she's a fragile yet powerful Uber who can snipe enemies from the back with her amazing wave damage. An amazing Halloween version of Yukimura. Count Yukimura shares similar stats to the original counterpart, with their abilities being switched for massive against floating enemies and a 30% chance to survive a lethal strike. The survive can be viewed as a bonus, and against floating, he deals 30,000 damage per second, which is astonishing for his rusher role. He'll quickly deal chunks of damage from his fast speed and insane damage before kicking the bucket, and thankfully, he's given a recharge time of 51 seconds, which allows you to use him many times in the field. He is inferior to the original Yukimura by a mile due to the lack of talents in true form, though in the end, he's arguably one of the best seasonal Ubers. Snow Miku is an amazing traitless crowd controller, thanks to her strong against and half a chance of freezing traitless for 57% of her uptime. With her long distance that can pierce upwards of 275, it's extremely rare to find a unit that can fill such a unique role as her. When the strong against is applied, she has nearly 100,000 health and deals 6,000 damage per second. This along her freeze already makes her a wonderful counter against traitless. Though she only has half a chance of freezing, having a unit that can freeze traitless for 4 seconds is too good to pass. Overall, an amazing traitless crowd controller and sniper. Kalisa is a wonderful mid-range rusher who deals massive damage against angels. When applied, she deals an insane 34,000 damage per second against angels, which is jaw-dropping due to her 350 range. Since angels are known for pushing heavy, she's given a fast recharge of 65 seconds in case your current Kalisa perishes on the field. She's also given curse immunity in her talents, which expands her usage, especially in Uncanny Legend. Just an amazing angel nuker overall. Hajime Saito is another rusher who has an Omni Strike that can pierce upwards of 200, with the ability to do massive damage against Red and Aku, and instantly pierce shields. His 200 Omni Strike is amazing, as it can hit more enemies that are a bit behind or coming to the front line. Against his trade, he deals 20,000 damage per second against Red, and 15,000 damage against Aku. He does a fine enough job against Red, since though 20,000 damage per second is amazing, it isn't enough for Red as there's many more alternatives. Now against Aku, his 15,000 damage per second is welcoming, as there still isn't many alternatives compared to Red. And thanks to his guaranteed pierce on shields and Omni Strike of 200, he does his job as a rusher against Aku pretty good. Satoru is an amazing counter against Aku thanks to his guaranteed chance of knockbacking and slowing for 66% of his uptime, with half a chance of piercing shields. With his long distance that has a pierce of 300, he will push nearly all of the Aku enemies back, thus letting room to breathe for your other units to deal damage, thanks to his 6-second slow. The half a chance of piercing shields is a nice bonus, as sometimes their common shield breakers can't reach the Aku backliner. He's also given immunity to Surge, which is amazing, as it increases his survivability by a lot. In the end, Satoru is an amazing crowd controller against Aku. Hayabusa is a mid-range metal critter in its first form, alien crowd controller in its second form, and zombie crowd controller in its true form. His first form easily makes him one of the best anti-metal Ubers in the game. His second form is also amazing thanks to his 300 pierce, allowing him to hit all aliens including backliners. And his true form makes him an amazing crowd controller against zombies, similarly to its second form. Now his big deal comes from his talents. He's given Aku typing and a 40% chance to pierce shields. With his 300 pierce and fast attack frequency of 5 seconds, he becomes an amazing counter against them. Just all in all, a Uber who's a jack of many trades. An amazing counter against Alien who has a long distance with 250 pierce, deals massive damage against them, along with a guaranteed weaken against for half his uptime, and on top of all of that, a guaranteed level 1 surge attack. When all of his abilities are applied, you get a unit who deals 18,000 damage per second against melee to backliner enemies, all the while they're weakened for half the uptime in the field. These stats are all in all amazing, though there is a small downside of them having a semi-weak survivability, though his 450 range is more than enough to let him survive in the field. An amazing alien sniper altogether. Kai is one of the best tankers in the game, having a raw 200,000 health, and with her resistance against floating, an insane 1 million health against them. She'll take all the hits in the front line from floating enemies, so none can progress further to your base. Not really much else to say about her since she does her job as a tanker incredibly. Just an incredible tanker overall. Sarukani is one of the more underestimated Ubers in the Ultra Souls, being a backliner who's strong against angels and zombies. Against the traits, he has the health of a 250,000 with 10,000 damage per second. His job as a backliner is amazing, as he'll more than likely never die in the field, thanks to his huge health pool. All the while, he does a great amount of damage to his target. He's given Savage Blow in his talents, which if landed, can be extremely rewarding. One of the more underrated Ubers in Ultra Souls and in the game. Eva Unit 01 is an amazing specialist against zombies and aliens and a good generalist overall. He's strong against the two traits, with his strengthened ability allowing him to increase his damage 150% once he reaches half his health. With the bonuses of Zombie Killer, Guarantee Barrier Break, and 30% chance, with the bonuses of Zombie Killer, Guarantee Barrier Break, and 30% chance to spawn a level 1 mini surge. Once strengthened, he deals nearly 9,000 damage per second, and for a standing range of 460 and big health, it's generally incredible as he can be used as a simple generalist at any stage. Now against aliens and zombies, he deals 6,000 damage per second, but with strengthen, deals a whopping 16,000. All the while, he has a health of nearly 200,000 against them. This along his guaranteed barrier break and zombie killer makes him an amazing counter against the two traits. His mean search is too rare and should be viewed as a bonus, and his guaranteed lethal strike is viewed as an extra knockback, which is nice. In the end, Eva Unit 01 manages to become an amazing generalist and specialist. Mighty Catapult is the ranged Uber who has a long distance that pierces upwards of 325 and does resistance against zombies with half a chance of weakening them for his full uptime. That's cool and all, but his real potential comes from his Ultra Form. Mighty Catapult is one of the best Ubers to Ultra Form, as his Ultra Form nearly doubles his damage. Once Ultra Formed, he deals 10,000 damage per second. Again, he has a pierce of 325, and not to mention he has an extremely small blind spot, to the point that no enemy can enter unless buried. He behaves as an Aphrodite but for all trades. His half a chance of weakening also becomes into guarantee that also targets relic, and that's not all. He has an insane 250,000 raw health, which becomes into 1.3 million health against zombies and relic, and once weaken is applied, 2.6 million HP. What? Not only do they look like a tank, they behave like one. Just all in all, an amazing Uber in which is finally safe to say is worth spending your Dark Cat size on. Blanca, being the best Uber from the Street Fighter collab, is a rusher who deals massive damage against Alien with an Omni Strike of 150 pierce and a guaranteed barrier break. Against aliens, he deals a whopping 32,000 damage per second, which is broken, as he will guarantee the hits thanks to his pierce and barrier break. Not only that, he's not given warp immunity, which becomes a beneficial thing as any enemies that warp him will just allow him to rush in and deal even more damage before he gets knocked down. In the end, Blanca somehow manages to do an incredible job in a role I never thought would exist, which would be an alien rusher. Strike Unit Ray is a specialist against floating who deals massive damage against them and is insanely tough against them as well. She deals an incredible 24,000 damage per second, all while being able to tank nearly 300,000 damage from them. She's an incredible unit to use against floating, and her talents give her a 40% chance to freeze them for nearly 85% uptime, which is actually pretty good. All in all, a simple yet floating destroying Uber. Thunderjack is a heavy melee hitter, being able to have half a chance of knocking back from his 3-part multi-hit against aliens and zombies or angels depending on form. He has a single attack in return for an insane 18,000 damage per second, which is extremely good for stages that have little to no peons. His knockbacks allow him to cancel attacks of enemies even if their attack animation isn't low, thanks to Thunderjack's constant knockback. He's best used similarly to Chun-Li, though he comes out on top, as though Chun-Li has a better range, Thunderjack has a better health, endurance, and faster recharge time. An amazing melee with many more room to unlock potential due to the lack of true form and talent. Amakusa is a decent anti-black and incredible Aku nuker. He deals massive damage against the 2, which results in 28,000 damage per second against black, and 21,000 damage against Aku, which is extremely good. A major drawback people may argue is his 3-part multi-hit, and while it can decrease his damage output, even if only 2 hits land, it's still a wonderful 14,000 damage per second, which other Ubers can't even reach against Aku. He likes shield pierce, though simply bringing common shield piercing units is more than enough to unlock his true potential. His surge immunity is good to have, as it increases his survivability, and overall is an underestimated anti-Aku nuker. An amazing crowd controller against both angels and floating thanks to his long distance pierce of 200 and guaranteed slow that reaches an uptime of 62%. He performs an incredible job as a crowd controller, and damage wise, he deals 4,000 damage a second, which isn't too shabby to be used as a generalist thanks to his 510 range. He's also given a 20% savage blow in Colossus Slayer. The savage blow rarely happens, though when it does, it can do some staggering damage on all enemies in the field. Colossus wise, he does an incredible job against Mega Moose and Archangel Exio. My man Fish is overall an incredible fish backliner who fish against fish and fishes fish when fishing. Bali is an incredible mid-range alien crowd controller with resistance and guarantees a freeze against them for an astonishing 75% uptime. With his resistance, he'll be able to tank many alien hits as he freezes them constantly. His immunity to warp and guaranteed barrier break makes him near unstoppable to do his freezing job, and his talents give him curse immunity, which as said before, allows him to be used in stages mixed with relic and alien. His range of 370 is what limits his usage a bit, though thanks to his 83-second reach charge, he'll be on the stage for the majority of the time as long as there are no heavy backliners. All in all, an amazing alien crowd controller. Kenshin Himura is an excellent ranged nuker who deals massive damage against Traitless and Aku. These two traits are arguably the most demanding traits for new units to counter, so for Kenshin to counter these already makes him great to use. Stats wise, he deals 17,000 damage per second against Traitless and Aku, which is genuinely insane. He's also given Surge Immunity, which allows him to counter Aku better, and though he's not given Shield Piercing, simply throwing an alternative Shield Piercing unit or even his raw damage alone can be more than enough to surpass that. There's really no flaws in Kenshin, as he does an incredible job as his role against Aku and Traitless. A heavily expensive Uber for a heavily powerful reward. I'll simply ignore his first two forms, as his main reason for being this high in the ranking is from his true form and talent/ultra talent. Now in his true form, he's given strong against alien enemies and immunity to waves and weaken. Talents, he's given a 40% chance to freeze them for a near full uptime, a 50% strengthen once he's in his last knockback, and finally, ultra talents unlock Aku typing and guarantee a surge attack. Put it in simple terms, he's a ginormous nuker against Aku and alien. Now even mentioning this, I can already feel my hard-earned NP disappear from my wallet. Though if you invest in all of those talents for nearly 1000 NP, you get these big numbers that I'm too tired to explain, so look at them, ooh. Now look at the Subway Surfers gameplay. He's a game-changing Uber, though not everyone has 1000 NP, meaning that some will rather use alternatives. In the end, he's an expensive Uber, though extremely powerful one at that. Mighty Dreadnought is a powerful nuker against Red and zombies who deal 26,000 damage per second against them. Red is easily power crept, though it's still a wonderful amount, but zombies on the other hand, you will wipe any zombies you encounter with Dreadnought thanks to his insane damage per hit. If there to be one thing to complain, it'd be his long attack animation, which can make him miss, though there really isn't many common units you bring in stages that are strong enough to knock them back, so in reality, the miss happens less often. All in all, a big heavy hitter that will get rid of any zombies and Red he'll encounter. Mikako is most known for being a nuker and a crown controller against alien, dealing 19,000 damage per second against them and slowing them for 85% of her uptime. She does an incredible job in both roles, as her massive damage allows her to mostly take chunks of the alien's health to the point they get knocked back, all the while they're nearly perma-slowed. There isn't much to say as she does her job fantastically well. Good job, Mikako. Momotaro is an incredible Red and Angel crowd controller, as he's most known for his true form, being able to have a 40% chance to freeze Red and Angels for nearly 90% of his uptime. A decent range and fast recharge is amazing, as he can simply just rack up more and more Momotaros thanks to his 58-second recharge, resulting in more freezing for both trades. Stats wise, he has amazing survivability and damage per second, with it being 4,000 per second, which can and will be stacked from the upcoming Momotaros. His talents allow him to make his uptime full, alongside weaken against the two trades, which can be useful in case freeze doesn't work. Ultra talents can be ignored as it takes 15 Dark Kasli, though if you're a real Momotaro fan like me, it can be worth it due to his guaranteed level 2 mini wave and immunity to waves, which lets him be used more often. In the end, Momotaro is a wonderful and fun Uber to use against Red and Angel. Arguably the best Uber to Ultra Form. Dioramos in his Ultra Form is an incredible angel and alien crowd controller, with being able to guarantee a knockback and slow that's nearly half his uptime against them, along with a guaranteed barrier break. His 3-part multi-hit allows him to pierce up to 180, which is great. His insane health of nearly 500,000 makes him unmovable, and in his talents, he's given Strengthen where his damage increases 50% once he reaches half his health. If the Strengthen and attack buff is applied, he deals an astonishing 31,000 raw damage per second, which is jaw-dropping. This makes Dioramos a literal Godzilla, not because of his amazing angel and alien debuffs, but because of his overall insane health and damage. Ultra forms are extremely difficult to obtain due to the amount of XP and Dark Cat size one has to save up, but if you could have one Uber to Ultra form, it would be Dioramo. Ganglion is a mid-range rusher who has long distance that pierces of 250 with the ability to be strong against alien and zombie. Against them, he does 8,000 damage and can tank up to 250,000 damage. These stats are wonderful, though his stats overall are just incredible to the point that you can use him in any stage. His pierce of 250 and 51,000 damage per hit will allow to take chunks off of enemies' health. Just a powerful rusher that can be thrown in and do his job right. Saki is an incredible backliner who's known for attacking only alien and relics in return for her amazing stats. She deals 8,000 damage per second against them in a big standing range of 600 with a long distance that pierces up to 300. In her talents, she's given strong against, which essentially increases her damage to 12 to 15,000 damage per second against relic and alien, which is insane. And apologies for not mentioning this to the summer variant Saki, but due to her fast recharge time of 58 seconds, her attack only ability allows her to be stacked in stages where the boss doesn't spawn unless the base is hit, which at times can lead to ground-breaking damage per second. In the end, she's an amazing specialist that fits perfectly well in her role. Hana is an incredible black sniper, being able to deal massive damage against them, guarantee a level 3 surge, a 3-part multi that with her long distance can reach upwards of 600 pierce, and finally Behemoth Slayer. Against black, she's great since when her standing range hit and her surge is applied, she deals 28,000 damage per second that 1 to 2/3 can pierce from her 600 range. Her biggest potential comes from her Behemoth Slayer, as Behemoth Slayer Ubers are extremely rare and her multi-hit long distance allows her to hit even backliner enemies. She can be viewed as a variant of Nala, which is known for being an incredible behemoth killer. Just overall, Kana is an amazing behemoth slayer. Destroyer is an excellent backliner who can deal massive damage against angels, zombies, and Aku. With the ability applied, he deals 22,000 damage per second against angels and zombies, and 17,000 damage against Aku, all in a safe spot of 475. He deals an amazing amount of damage, though his biggest drawback is his slow speed of 3. Thankfully, it isn't a huge drawback as other wonderful Ubers, since at the end, he manages to deal huge damage against his certain traits. The lack of surge immunity is sad, though his 475 range and decent survivability is good enough to ignore that. Lastly, another reason on why he's high is due to his amazing cat combo, Land Air Assault, which is a 2-slot cat combo that increases all units attack power by 15%, which is amazing. This cat combo alone makes true forming Destroyer worth it. All in all, an amazing specialist against the 3 traits with a powerful cat combo. Baby Garu is an excellent generalist who can resist traded enemies, has an Omni Strike of 80 pierce, guarantees a level 5 mini wave, a zombie killer, and immune to wave. All these abilities make him usable for most of the traits he's against, besides traitless and relic, as relic can curse which he isn't immune to. His Omni Strike makes him more likely to land a hit, and the mini wave is nice to get rid of some weak peons, or at least knock them back. Simply a great tanker at nearly all of his traits. Linlin is an amazing mid-range anti-angel in Aku. She's one of the few Ubers who can guarantee a shield breaker constantly, and thanks to her surge spawn, can even reach to the most annoying backline Aku. With the strong against and surge applied, she can deal 15,000 damage per second against angels, and 12,000 damage per second against Aku, which is pretty great with her guaranteed shield break. She lacks surge immunity, though thanks to her strong against, she'll survive long enough for you to send another Linlin. Overall, just a great Uber who can guarantee shield breaking against Akus like no other. Mighty Recon Corps is an extremely interesting unit who only targets traded enemies in return for dealing a hefty damage against them. Against traded, he deals 12,000 damage per second, which makes him an amazing generalist. His survivability is also amazing since he's given 8 knockbacks, allowing him to reposition himself more than the average Uber. His talents also give him curse immunity, which allows him to carry you through uncanny legends, which is wonderful. The biggest disadvantage is that he can't attack tradeless at all, though it's completely fair trade for what he can do. One of the few Ubers you should invest your Uber cat size on, as Mighty Recon is an amazing generalist. Juven's is an amazing angel tanker melee, as the resistance against them and has a 20% chance of dodging them. With the resistance applied, he has nearly 2/3 of a million health, and with a 20% chance of dodging, he'll be there for a long time, all the while he does 11,000 damage per second, though it's only single attack. He defends so amazingly well, and yet he's given an extremely small cooldown of 38 seconds, which odds are you'll have at least 2 Juvens in the field. Ramen Cat does handle an amazing job against angels, though Juven's amazing tanking abilities is too good to just replace him with Ramen. If the stage is pure angels, consider it a cakewalk if Juven's is brought onto the field. Hanzo is an extremely good Uber for one that doesn't even have a true form. Hanzo can deal massive damage against floating and black, though he's also given a guaranteed freeze for nearly half his uptime. You can tell he's amazing, as he does both roles of crowd controlling and nuker incredibly. He deals 18,000 damage per second, so any black or floating with high knockbacks will be constantly juggled by Hanzo, and floating and especially black are known for their high knockbacks, which Hanzo will take advantage of with his freeze. Overall, an overpowered Uber who hasn't even unlocked his true potential yet. Warlock and Pierre is one of the funner Ubers to use. His first form is known to be the only unit in the game to have Base Destroyer. This ability allows the unit itself to deal 4 times more damage towards enemy bases. This has been easily used to achieve stages where he can just outright skip the stage and avoid the enemies. Outside the Base Destroyer ability, he does a good job against floating, alien, and angels, though his true form only allows him to target aliens in exchange for his insane stats. His true form stats allow him to deal 20,000 damage per second and have a hefty raw health of 158,000. His talents are nice, as he's given immune to waves and curse, which opens so many doors for him, though his ultra talents is where his potential is at. His ultra talents allow him to target traitless and have surge immunity, also Colossus Slayer, but that's kind of irrelevant compared to the other two. Surge immunity just allows him to fit more in newer stages, which is more than welcome. Now traitless is broken, since at level 60, which is required in order to unlock his ultra talents, he deals 38,000 damage per second, and 48,000 if the attack buff is applied. This is extremely groundbreaking, as traitless is a huge demanded Uber target, and for Warlock to do such massive damage is insane. Of course, with the ultra talents, it comes with the NP and Dark Kasli as required to unlock them, though he's one of the more better ones to unlock, so keep in mind about that. Just an amazing nuker against the traits he's up against. Thermite Deluxe is one of, if not, the best anti-zombie Uber of all time. He's strong against zombies and guarantees a freeze against them in each of his 3-part multi-hit, resulting in a 42% uptime. Being strong against zombies gives him over 200,000 health and 11,000 damage per second. Not only that, but with his talents, he's given attack up, which increases his damage by 50%, resulting in a 17,000 damage per second once he gets to half a health. His stats are also organized so that he can reposition himself 4 times, can deal damage behind him up to -675 range, and is a zombie killer. He's made to perfectly counter any zombie he's up against. Without a doubt, one of the best anti-zombie Ubers of all time. Also, don't purchase his Soul Strike talent, as they could do more harm than good. Bora is an alien killer where they are resistance, guarantee a barrier break, and deal massive damage against them. With these abilities, Bora has 250,000 health against alien and deals 20,000 damage per second against them. That's not all, as with his talents, he receives a strengthened ability where in his last knockback, his damage increases by 50%, letting him deal 30,000 damage per second against alien. In stages where it's pure alien, Bora will sweep. If there'd be one thing to point out, is that due to his 390 standing range, he won't be able to strive as much in mixed stages. Thankfully, his 81-second cooldown allows him to be respawned quickly in case things go south. Simply an amazing alien nuker. Tomo is a long-distance backliner who deals massive damage against Angel. Against Angels, she deals 17,000 damage per second, which can pierce up to 225 thanks to her long distance. These stats make her a near-perfect counter to Angels, as her safe standing range of 475 lets her deal her insane damage. Angels are known to push heavy, but thanks to her bigger than average inner long distance range of 175, Angels are less likely to get into her blind spot. All in all, an Angel Destroyer in the field. Lucifer the Fallen is an amazing backliner who can pierce upwards of 150 with the ability of being strong against floating and Aku while guaranteeing a level 1 surge each hit. Against floating, he deals 6,500 damage per second, which with his standing range of 550 is amazing. Against Aku, he still deals 5,000 damage per second, which is powerful since his immunity surge lets him guarantee each hit with no problem. His surge spawn is more inside his range, so it's more used to land on the enemies that get too close to him, which is nice. If applied to his attack power, he deals 11,000 damage per second against Aku and 13,000 against floating, which is wonderful. Overall, an amazing anti-floating and Aku backliner who can be used as an overall backliner generalist. Nekoluga is a huge backliner who, though is only given single attack, deals an insane amount of damage against any enemy he hits. He's best used in stages where there's little to no peons, and once you find those stages, his 124,000 damage per hit will take huge chunks from the enemies you're against. His 720 range is insane, as little to no enemies will be able to outrange him. Nekoluga will change the difficulty of any stage with no peons to easy mode. Pai is a pure anti-red nuker, being able to do massive damage against them and being insanely tough against them. Against red, she deals 24,000 damage in a safe 440 standing range, and survivability wise, her health goes over 300,000 against red. These stats make her near invincible against red, as she deals a heavy amount of damage against them. If you rolled her, consider most of the reds in the game a cakewalk. Dark Garu is the mid-range tanker who has resistance against traitless, guarantees a level 5 mini wave, doubles his health once half a health, immunity to waves, and guarantees a lethal strike. Against traitless, he does an amazing job. Thanks to his amazing survivability, no other Ubers can say they have against traitless. His raw 6,000 damage per second is nice, 7,500 if the mini wave is included. Speaking of the mini wave, it can be extremely useful to get rid of or at least knock back the upcoming peons thanks to his amazing peer. Dark Garu Strengthen is amazing, as it turns his already amazing 7,500 damage per second to 15,000, which is groundbreaking, and his immunity to waves unlock more usage for him in many stages. One of the best mid-rangers in the game that will do an amazing job against traitless and in a lot of peon hefty stages. Night Oracle Ray is an Evangelion knockoff of Mitama, with having similar stats to her. She's nerfed, where her survivability is worsened due to her only being given 5 knockbacks rather than 15, her slow isn't nearly permanent as Mitama's, and she isn't given the immunities Mitama is given, such as the common debuffs and wave. Her slow debuff being shorter makes her significantly worse than Mitama, as she doesn't crowd control as well, and her survivability makes her less likely to live as long as Mitama. This all sounds terrible, though a knockoff of one of the best Ubers is still amazing. She can still do a fine enough job in surviving, and her guaranteed slow on all traded enemies with her 200 peers is too good to pass up. She's also given immunity to surge and a 30% chance to spawn a level 1 surge attack, which isn't too special, though both are nice qualities to have in return of her nerf. Overall, a still amazing crowd controller to be brought in a lot of stages. Baby Cat is an amazing melee waver, with being known for his guaranteed level 2 wave attack from his hefty 60,000 damage. Thanks to his fast recharge time of 50 seconds and 100,000 health, he will constantly be able to land heavy wave attacks that pierces up to nearly 300, which is amazing. Just recently, he's been given an ultra form which gives him a level 3 wave and an omni strike that pierces 60. Both are amazing, though his ultra form shouldn't be the biggest priority, as Dark Kasli are still difficult to obtain. In the end, he's an amazing nuker that will deal hefty damage to all enemies in the field. An amazing generalist with immunity to waves, resistance to black, and double the damage once half a health. The immunity and double strengthen is what easily makes him amazing, since he has a fast recharge time of just 68 seconds with nearly 100,000 health, meaning that you'll more than likely have multiple Keijis dealing 6,000 to 12,000 damage per second strengthened on the field. He's one of the best anti-waves, and as just said before, his damage is amazing. Just overall, a safe bet amazing generalist. Wendy is a general nuker who deals massive damage against floating enemies. Once ultra form, she gains an amazing range of 510, and her massive damage changes into insane against floating. With her insane ability, she deals an insane 72,000 damage per second against floating, which is concerningly powerful. Her talents are also incredible, as when the attack up of 50% and attack buff is applied, she deals 130,000 damage per second against floating. There's no other unit that can compare Wendy's power against floating, easily making her one of the best anti-floating units of all time. Is the Dancer is a mid-range unit with an Omni Strike that pierces 50 range, deals massive damage against all trades, doubles her damage when half a health, and is immune to waves, knockback, freeze, slow, and weaken. Against traded, she deals 11,000 to 14,000 damage per second, and when strengthened, 22 to 28,000 damage per second, which is extremely good. One of the problems though is due to her multi-hit, units that have a high knockback count will get knocked back by the first hit and avoid the rest of her attacks, resulting in her damage per second falling. Still, she does a wonderful job against short range and low knockback count enemies. Dark Mitama is a mid-range traitless crowd controller with a guaranteed chance weakening and slowing traitless for an uptime of 70%, while resisting and being immune to the common debuffs, as well as waves. Since her long distance pierces to 275, any traitless she counters, Mitama will hit and weaken, plus slow them, which is incredible. Her survivability is amazing, since she gets to reposition herself 14 times, all the while she's resistance against her main target. Immunity to knockback, freeze, slow, and weaken will let her do her crowd controlling job with no worries, while immunity to waves lets her become an amazing unit to bring when the stage contains a lot of waves that maybe Octopus can't block. Overall, an amazing traitless crowd controller. Catman is the best Dark Heroes with the ability to do massive damage against alien and depending on the form, either floating, angel, or relic. All of his traits are incredible as he deals 14,000 damage per second against relic and 18,000 against the other trait. His survivability as well as standing range makes countering the 4 traits he targets a much easier experience. One of the more underrated units. Reika shares the same stats as Catman, where they deal massive damage against certain traits. Reika deals massive damage against zombies, alien, and once talented, relic. Reika is better than Catman as she has a slightly better range, bigger damage per second, faster cooldown, better survivability in terms of knockback, and more demanding target. Her only disadvantage is her multi-hit, though thanks to her attack frequency, she still deals consistent damage and her multi-hit isn't that big of a deal to worry about. In general, she's an amazing nuker against the 3 traits she's against. Is a short mid-ranger with the ability to do massive damage against traitless and strengthen 150% when she reaches half a health. She can guarantee to break barriers and pierce shields, has Colossus Slayer, and immune to nearly all debuffs including wave and surges. She has many roles and surprisingly does a great job at all of them. Since she has immunity to surge and wave, she's able to get into the field and break shields or barriers at a safe range while dealing a decent amount of damage. Against traitless, she's amazing as her strengthen and massive damage against can add up to 30,000 damage per second, which is amazing as she also includes the 50 pierce from her Omni Strike. Though again, due to her multi-hit, fearless enemies that have a high knockback count may not receive the entire damage it puts out. Overall, a unit that breaks all barriers and shields while handling traitless enemies. Last boss is referred to as the boss killer, and it's easy to see why. It's best to focus on the attack power rather than damage per second, as he's meant to land 1 or 2 hits only before dying on the field. Last boss raw damage is 150,000, which is already incredible, though his abilities make him even stronger, as once his health lowers to 30%, his attack power increases by 50% or 225,000 damage. And that's not all. Each hit he lands, he has a 30% chance to land a savage blow, which triples his damage. So if he's strengthened while landing a savage blow, he'll do 700,000 damage per hit, which is insane. He's immune to nearly all debuffs, which allows him to go in and land a hit with less trouble. Of course, you need to time him right in order for him to land a hit on the enemies you aim to damage, as his attack frequency is slow, though it can be the most rewarding hit. Aphrodite is a big backliner with the ability to do massive damage against aliens. Since aliens are known for having backliners, Aphrodite being able to hit them thanks to her pierce of 250 obliterates any alien who gets to the field. With massive damage, she does 14,000 damage per second, which is a bunch for someone having a standing range of 600. Overall, her stats are built perfectly to counter the entire genre of aliens. Saber is an amazing mid-range rusher slash nuker who deals massive damage against floating enemies. She's an amazing anti-floating as she can rush in and deal 22,000 damage per second with a long distance that pierces up to 250. All the while she stands in a safe spot for a rusher of 350. If the stage you're in doesn't have any backliner or long distance enemies, she'll more than likely help you clear the stage more easier and quicker. Just an amazing floating killer. Kaza Jizo's second and true form can be ignored, as we all know his usage comes down to his first form. In Kaza Jizo's first form, he becomes a cheap mid-range spammable Uber, who can deal massive damage against Black and Angel. He's able to deal 8,000 damage per second against Black and Angel, while having a fast recharge time of 4 seconds. You can constantly spawn Kaza Jizo, and that damage per second can pile up to even hundreds of thousands of damage per second. Of course, since Kaza Jizo's a spammable mid-ranger, his survivability is a bit on the weaker side, as he only has a standing range of 320 and 15,000 health. So of course, you can just spam another one. In the end, Kaza Jizo is an amazing cheap spammable mid-ranger who will assist you incredibly as he stacks up with the other Kaza Jizos to deal insane amounts of damage. If you happen to have EVA Unit 02, any red you encounter becomes a walk in the park. With a standing range of 400 and a long distance of 250 to 650, against red, he'll able to do 24,000 damage, and when strengthened, 48,000. This will obliterate any red he goes against. With red being the most power crept target, EVA Unit 02 surpasses the other anti-red Ubers into being the best anti-red Uber in the entirety of the game. This is my homeboy right here. Shadow Gao is an excellent anti-traitless with his 18,000 damage per second against traitless with a guaranteed freeze against them. View Shadow Gao as Hanzo, where they constantly knock back traitless due to his huge damage and 1 second free stun. His health and standing range makes him near invincible, and immunity to waves opens way too many doors for Shadow Gao to shine. An amazing Uber who has a long distance that pierces up to 325 and doubles their strength the first time they get knocked back. If Ganesha ever gets knocked back, his damage per second will go to 7,000 or 9,000 if you talent him with the extra strengthen. This applies to all enemies including traitless, so this makes him useful in nearly all stages. Just an Uber who takes chunks of enemies' health in each hit they land. Gao is an amazing generalist who has a range of 480 and is strong against traded enemies. If you apply the strong against, you get a unit who has a health of 120 to 160,000 and a damage of 8 to 9,000 damage per second. His critical should be taken as a savage blow rather than a critical hit, and immunity to waves is more than amazing, as not a lot of Ubers have a big range and immunity to waves at the same time. Gao is just an extremely strong Uber who will stay alive for the entire round and deal good chunks of damage. Empress Chronos is an amazing crowd controller as she's able to guarantee a freeze for a second to traded enemies from each of her 3 multi-hit with a long distance that reaches up to 250. From her attack frequency of 10 seconds and being able to freeze for 3 seconds, you have most of the enemies frozen for 30% of the run. This allows for the other 9 units that you brought to stack up and deal as much damage as possible before the enemies unfreeze, which is amazing. Of course, there's counters that Chronos may have trouble with, such as enemies that curse or have immunity to freeze, but in the end, if you want an amazing crowd controller that lets your units have the time to whoop the enemies, then Chronos is an amazing choice. D'Artagnan is a mid-range long-distance generalist who deals massive damage against traded with immunity to waves and warp. When the massive damage is applied, his damage can go from 10,000 to 13,000 damage per second. That damage with 225 Pierce makes him able to completely push back due to his hard damage. Sadly, compared to his Epic Fest alternative, his survivability is a bit worse, though it doesn't change the fact that he's an amazing traded killer. One-Eyed Asuka is an Evangelion alternative to Kasli, where Asuka has a long distance, guarantees a level 3 surge attack, and curse to all enemies for 2.5 seconds, as well as Colossus Layer. Her curse ability was nearly nerfed to half the duration, so if the surge doesn't land on the enemy you want to curse, it won't be as effective. So just like Kasli, Asuka is used for pure damage, as her level 3 surge allows her damage per second to go from 2.2 thousand to nearly 9,000. 9,000 for a surge that can spawn 400 further than the standing range is groundbreaking, making her an amazing unit. It must be said that she isn't immune to wave or surge, so it limits her in stages where those are common. Though overall, One-Eyed Asuka is the best collab Uber in the entire game, and an amazing Uber overall. Amaterasu is simply put an amazing backlander against all trades thanks to her massive damage against traded enemies. Against traded, her damage will range from 11,000 to 14,000 damage per second, which is amazing coming from a standing range of 455. Her talents make her an even better generalist with being able to break alien barriers and gaining zombie killer, as well as surviving a lethal strike. You can bring Amaterasu in any stage and she'll do a fantastic job against traded. Goddess of Light Sirius is a ranged generalist where they're strong against traded enemies, a Colossus Slayer, immune to knockback, freeze, slow, weaken, warp, curse, and toxic, with their multi-hit being able to pierce 120. Since she's strong against traded, her 5,000 jumps to 8,000 damage per second, with her health reaching up to 100,000. These are amazing as she becomes one of the best generalists to bring against mixed stages, and her piercing of 120 helps her deal even more damage further. Though should be said that the 120 pierce is only half her damage. Still an amazing pierce. What makes her way better than other Ubers similar though, is the recharge time being a quick 77 seconds. Since their survivability is amazing, you'll probably have 2 Sirius on the field, which will wipe most enemies in the game. Her Colossus Slayer is amazing against nearly all Baron enemies, especially with her immunity to debuff. Overall, an amazing generalist and the best Colossus Slayer Uber. Yukimura is a rusher who deals massive damage against Black. Against Black, he does a whopping 36,000 damage per second against them, and if talented, 60,000 from the attack buff and strengthen. His usage can still work more than ever outside of Black, as he still manages to deal 15,000 damage per second with his strengthen and attack buff. And with the speed of 75, he will guarantee a hit each time he gets knocked back. Little things such as a 51-second recharge time and extremely fast speed compared to other rushers and strengthen is what makes Yukimura arguably the best rusher in the entire game, arguably better than Awakened Bahamut. D'Artagnan is simply put a traitless killer. Being a nuker against one of the rare traits is what easily puts him up this high. With a damage per second of 15,000 against traitless with a long distance pierce of 210, he'll clear any traitless he encounters. If he reaches 60% of his health, his strengthen will double his damage, resulting in a 30,000 damage per second against traitless. That makes any traitless obsolete. His standing range isn't too shabby as he has a 340 range with a 91,000 health, all the while a quick recharge time which may possibly allow you to have 2 D'Artagnans on the field. Overall, once you roll him, any trait list you thought was difficult now becomes a test dummy for D'Artagnan. That's referred to as Marauder Cat. Lesser Demon Cat is a melee nuker that has a single attack in exchange for better stat. If true formed and talented, Balrog can deal 34,000 damage per second, and when fully strengthened, can deal 102,000 per second. He will murder any unit that will get past his way. Of course, due to his single attack, stages that are filled with peons will often weaken Lesser Demon Cat's performance. So from Uncanny Legends to Zero Legends, peons are less common, thus Lesser Demon Cat's usage and opportunity peaks to the roof. In the end, Balrog is one of the best best units you should heavily invest on. Mitama was formerly known as the best Uber in the entire game. Now, she's one of the best Ubers in the entire game. Her second form is what's always used, with her being a mid-range and the definition of a crowd controller. Mitama's abilities are being able to be resistant against traded enemies, a guaranteed slow against traded for 3.3 seconds, immunity to waves, knockback, freeze, slow, weaken, all while having a long distance that reaches up to 300 pierce. She will work on any stage no matter what, as not only will she nearly permanently slow the traded, but resist them. And thanks to her 15 knockback, she's able to reposition herself 14 times. Even when Ponos attempts to nerf her, such as adding enemy curses and surges, she still manages to slow nearly all the enemies on stage, thanks to her 300 pierce. If you rolled her, consider most of the game a cakewalk. King of Doom Phono is a backlaner whose 3 multi-hit can reach up to 400 pierce, guaranteed to slow to all enemies for 2 seconds, onto mini surge in each hit, as well as immunity to waves, curse, and surge. The immunities make him viable in the entire game, and though the slow only lasts to 30% of his uptime, it can pierce up to 400 range, thus making all enemies stunned for a bit in order for your other units to do their job. Treat the mini surge as a nice little bonus, as his main damage dealer is his main attack power. In his great standing range of 500, from 490 to 550, his damage per second is 7,000, which is amazing for the other things he can offer. From 550 to 750, he still deals 4.7 thousand damage per second, and from 750 to 900, he deals 2.3 thousand damage per second. All 3 spots are more than enough to whoop any enemy seen on stage. All in all, he somehow manages to be a jack of all trades. Kasli the Scourge is an amazing mid-range crowd controller, who is mainly used in order to deal a strong amount of damage and crowd control. She has a guaranteed chance of a level 2 surge attack and half a chance of knocking back traded enemies from her long distance. That pierces upwards of 300. She is amazing at doing her job, as she can be viewed as a consistent breaker blast who chips the enemy's health quickly. If there was a problem with her performance, it's that her health isn't high enough for the small standing range she has, though thankfully her recharge time is in the shorter side. Overall, if you have her in your loadout, she'll make most stages entirely easy. Sit down with me on this one. There's a reason on why she's second place. The first thing that needs to be said is that Kasli the Bane is without a doubt an amazing unit. A unit with an amazing health, has 12,000 damage per second if surge is included, as well as a long distance and amazing spawn surge. Immune to many things, most notably wave and surge, and of course her guaranteed near permanent curse against all enemies, removing their abilities that may have been terrible on the field. There is no denying that Kasli the Bane is a near perfect Uber, but I believe Ponos is aware of that. With an increasing number of enemies having immunity to surge and even counter surge, Kasli the Bane starts to become less effective or even worse, risky in newer stages. Kasli the Bane heavily relies on surge, which makes sense as it's the reason she can constantly deal damage and curse. And while it's rewarding, once enemies counter that surge, she really can't be viewed as the best Uber in the game. Once again, it should be said, she is an amazing Uber, crowd controller, and damage dealer. Child of Destiny Phono is the best Uber in the entire game, with his insane standing range of 600 and massive damage against traded. He carries you from Empire of Cats to the newest Hero Legends. It should be said that only a small spot of his range does his 3 multi-hit land, resulting in his 17 to 13,000 damage per second against traded, though thankfully it's in his standing range where enemies are bound to be. Even then, he does an insane 12,000 to 8,000 damage against traded within a 200 pierce, and a 4,000 damage per second within a 400 pierce. He can be viewed as a literal Aphrodite for all trades. One of the few concerns people may have is his risk to get cursed, though it should be said that there really is no enemy that can reach him to curse. His immunity to waves and surges allow him to avoid the attacks containing curses from the enemies above. Units with long range have too low of a pierce to reach Phonoa. The only problematic enemies would be both forms of Lusas and Golem Sunfish. Even then, Lusa is only in 2 stages and Golem Sunfish does curse Phonoa due to their 50 pierce, but if Phonoa is already in that standing range, odds are it's because you're already pushing the enemies back heavy, thus winning the battle. The other 2 concerns are his job against traitless and fast speed. His fast speed may worry a few people, though his huge range of 600 plus little to no blind spot will remove any potential problem, and if anything could be beneficial as his small clip just gives him a bigger pierce, so there's really no complaining there. Plus he'll get knocked back into a safe position if the field does get chaotic thanks to his 5 knockback count. One thing I can semi-agree on is his performance against traitless. Against traitless, his damage per second is just his original raw damage, which is nothing to praise about. Though a unit with 600 range is still a unit with 600 range. You can draw him in and he'll do an amazing job against traitless enemies while having a huge piercing. It can even reach Kamel. There's so many objections against Phonos people may bring up, when in reality Phonos' raw stats are amazing, as his raw damage, survivability, and range outclasses all potential problems people may be concerned about. With that being said, Phonoa is without a doubt the best Uber in the entire game. Sure, Kasli the Bane may be able to crowd control amazingly, but the raw insane damage Phonoa puts out clears any and all enemies in the field, including ones that Kasli may not be able to counter well. Child of Destiny Phonoa not only clears all enemies he encounters, he also clears every Uber in this ranking. And with that, this is the end of the ranking and the video itself. The last thing I'd like to mention is thank you for watching, and as always, stay optimistic and take care.